The three-headed dragon was naturally defiant, and even planned to resist Ling Han. But Ling Han merely released his aura slightly, and this divine beast was instantly terrified out of its wits. It obediently became their mount. There was not one path that led to the castle, but rather 5. When Ling Han steered the carriage and arrived, he saw that there were already a great many carriages parked there. They were in various shapes and sizes, and there were very many of them. A considerable number of people had not entered into the castle yet, but were rather standing here, as if they were waiting for others. Brother Tong Lin is here. When they saw the chariot approach, 3 men immediately came over. They were Tong Lin's best friends, and could also be called his gang. Because their clan's power was not as strong as the Tong clans, Tong Lin was also their leader. When they saw that it was Ling Han steering the carriage, they couldn't help but feel curious. When did the dragon chariot need a coachman? The three-headed dragon had long since gained intelligence, so did it still need someone to steer it? Furthermore, this coachman was actually just a great saint. His cultivation level was a little too low, wasn't it? No matter what, it should have been a saint king at least. And under their eyes, Ling Han opened the carriage door, inviting his wife to alight. Since the Empress was already in the limelight, he decided to simply become the background. Today, he was here to set off his wife. The Empress walked out. Her figure was tall and slender, so her head could almost touch the top of the carriage door. She wore a golden skirt woven from the highest grade of saintly material. The ingredients had come from the mountain bandit's lair, and it was naturally Ling Han who had hurriedly created it in the last few days. Her bearing was unmatched in the first place, and added with being set off by this saint-grade treasured robe, she immediately became the center of attention of the whole area. The veil on her face also added some mystery to her persona, filling others with unending desire to catch a glimpse of her true face. Gasp! Brother Tong Lin really has good luck with women to actually get hold of such an exquisite beauty. You haven't seen her face yet, so how do you know that she is exquisite? Fuck with this kind of bearing and this kind of figure. If she is not an exquisite beauty, I will cut off my own head to become a ball for you. The 3 men all showed stunned expressions and couldn't help but whisper amongst themselves. The other people in the surroundings were also the same. The Empress's bearing was really too strong. She could become the center of attention of any place at any time. With her there, all other women would only be pure background and completely pale in comparison. She is Luan Xing. What? The super genius who lit up 92 holes with a single strike yesterday? Hiss. I have heard of her name, but I never imagined that her bearing would actually be so enchanting. She must be the holy daughter of a major sect. Or how else could she possibly have such astonishing natural talent, strength, and bearing? Strange. This is clearly the Tong clan's chariot. With the strength of the Tong clan, how could they possibly manage to make a connection with her? Everyone was confused. There were not more than over a dozen people who had passed the test of strength of the whole pillar, but Changsun Liang also invited the young generation of the various forces of Black Moon City. Thus, there were many gathered here. Everyone knew everyone else, and though Tong Lin's natural talent in cultivation was not too bad, compared with the Empress, he wasn't even worthy to tie her shoestrings, and the Tong clan was far from being enough to make a connection with a large sect. There was something strange about this matter. Ling Han broke into a grin, and his mischievous nature burned bright. Who asked him to be friends with the large black dog? He coughed and said, "Let me give everyone an explanation. We met Tong Lin on our way here, but Tong Lin went into the bushes with his female companion on a spontaneous whim, and allowed us to have his chariot, saying that there was no need to worry, and that he would be arriving soon." A spontaneous whim? Going into the bushes with his female companion? Everyone bore a strange expression. Could it be that Tong Lin's sexual desires suddenly surged, and he couldn't help but want to satisfy them immediately? That's not right. Even if he wanted to do that, wouldn't it be better inside the carriage? Someone asked curiously. None of their carriages were ordinary, and they had protective formations. They could even block a powerful attack, so being shake-proof and soundproof was even easier. Who knows? Maybe Tong Lin likes doing it outdoors? The possibility of being discovered at any time having the taste of a clandestine love affair. This is not a bad idea. I will have to give it a try sometime. Shiminda, you keep staring at the wives of others. Aren't you afraid of karma? This piece of news was more explosive. Everyone could not help feeling their desire for gossip burn, and became busybodies. Just at this moment, another carriage steered over, and a young man alighted from it with a beautiful female companion by his side. However, he wore a very strange expression on his face, and the moment he came down, he hurriedly exclaimed, "You guys would never guess what I saw on my way here." He paused, seeming to leave everyone in suspense, and then continued, "There was actually an illicit couple engaged in public sex. Just guess. Who was the man?" "Fuck. It really was him." "Tong Lin," everyone replied, seemingly all at the same time. The young man from before was dazed for a moment. "Fuck, so you guys had all already seen it." At first, everyone was just skeptical, but now hearing these words from this young man, it was equivalent to having been given solid proof, so even if they could not believe it, they had no other choice. TSK, this Tong Lin was really not picky. He was already close to the castle, and still wanted a role in the bushes. If Changsun Liang found out, this young king tier would definitely be furious. "You actually came to have public sex in my territory. Just how much of an insult was that to me?" Everyone immediately decided to separate themselves from Tong Lin. Otherwise, it would be terrible if they were to be implicated by their connections to him. How could Changsun Liang, a king tier that had withdrawn from worldly affairs, destined to have a future filled with boundless prospects, be easily offended? "Come on, we should head in." Everyone had no further interest to greet and chat with their friends here any longer. Even Tong Lin's 3 friends turned around and left, wanting nothing more than to pretend that they had never met Tong Lin before. The cast was very big. Thus, even though they were clearly at the main entrance, they had still spent some time to make their way into the main hall. There were already rows of tables that had been arranged here. The tables were not very big, and could only accommodate 2 people sitting side by side. This was also why the red-haired young man had said that every person could only bring a single companion. There was a plaque that was placed on each table, and a name was written on it. The meaning was very clear here. Everyone was to be seated according to their corresponding plaque. That was good too, as it would prevent any arguments from breaking out. Ling Han and the Empress found their places. However, only the Empress's name was there. As for Ling Han, today he was merely there to join in for the meal. He did not care at all, and sat down in a cross-legged position, starting a quiet conversation with the Empress. The table was very low, so there was no need for chairs. Instead, there were mats on the floor and one could sit on them. And, after Ling Han sat down, he was involuntarily slightly surprised because a heat from within the mat entered into his body, and it actually had the effect of increasing origin power. However, he had now reached the peak stage of Great Saint, so such benefits had no effect on him. As expected of a holy son, even what he used to receive his guests was such high-grade articles. Immediately, Ling Han felt an urge to have this for takeaway. This could be given to Feng Piyun and the others. Though the effect was not especially strong, every little bit counted. If they could speed up their accumulation of origin power a little, then why not? "Hey, just guess what I saw when I just came over?" A person called out very excitedly when he had just entered into the main hall. "Tong Lin having public sex." A few people immediately replied in disapproval. The person who had just entered was immediately stunned. And here he thought that he had discovered a huge piece of news. Every new person who arrived would excitedly talk about the explosive event that they had witnessed, but cold water would be immediately poured on them. Wasn't it just something as minor as public sex? But this Tong Lin was really outrageously bold in his lust to actually dare have public sex in Changsun Liang's official residence. TSK. He was destined to be in trouble. Everyone naturally couldn't be bothered to waste time on him, and they were all minding their own business, connecting with friends that they had not seen for a very long time, or developing new friendships. Black Moon City was really too big. Ordinarily, everyone indeed rarely had the chance to gather together. More and more people arrived. The actual host, Changsun Liang, had yet to appear, but the Empress had already become the center of attention, everyone gathering around her firstly to gain her favor, and secondly to make discreet inquiries about exactly which large sect the Empress originated from. The Empress didn't even bother to respond, and it was Ling Han who became her spokesperson, dispatching everyone who had come. However, he did not coldly offend anyone. Who knew these people might be of use in future? Furthermore, they hadn't offended them either, so what need was there for him to insult them? Right after more than an hour had passed, Changsun Liang finally arrived. The arrival of the Holy Sun. With a soft exclamation, the whole main hall immediately became silent. Light footsteps were heard, and a young man wearing a purple gold crown was striding out of a set of doors. His figure was broad and tall, and his eyes were very bright, as if they were two suns, and no one dared to stare at them. His bearing was also incredibly strong, especially within the diameter of 3 feet away from him. His aura had solidified, and turned into multiple true dragons, true phoenixes, and other divine beasts like Qilin and black tortoises, which were endlessly turning over around him. And that red-haired young man stood behind him, a fanatical expression on his face, as if Changsun Liang was a god instead of a human being in his eyes. Our respects to the Holy Sun. A considerable number also knelt down, and the others stood up as well as they clasped their hands in respect. This was an unmatched king tier with talent so high he was first in a 2-star force. He would not be afraid of even a prodigy that had walked out from a 3-star city and could match or even surpass the latter. Of course, neither Ling Han nor the Empress stood. With their pride, how could they possibly bend at the waist to a cultivator that was their equal? This caused those in the surroundings to feel uneasy. If the Holy Sun became angered, would they also be cracked down on? Rise! Changsun Liang stated calmly, pressing down with his hands, indicating that everyone could sit back down. His eyes swept over Ling Han and the Empress, and a smile curled his lips as he greeted her with clasped hands. Fairy Luan Xing. The Empress did not even look directly at him, and only nodded slightly. She had greeted him. It was this kind of prideful attitude that caused everyone to firmly believe that the Empress had to be the holy daughter of some great sect. Neither my strength nor natural talent was inferior to yours, and my status was more noble, so I could naturally put on airs. Changsun Liang could be said to have been mildly rebuffed, but he appeared to be very magnanimous, and broke into a smile, as amiable as a spring breeze. Come, I have prepared some wine and food, so do not be reserved, everyone. His eyes swept over the gathered masses, and his brow wrinkled slightly. That was because practically all the seats in the main hall were occupied, and there was only one person missing. Tong Lin. He had already appeared, yet Tong Lin was not here yet. He was putting on even greater airs than himself. Changsun Liang couldn't help but show a hint of displeasure, and asked, "Where's Tong Lin?" Pooh. Some people had already begun to drink, and when they heard this, they spluttered, and coughs rang out. What's going on? Changsun Liang looked at the side. The red-haired young man understood his meaning, and immediately nodded in respect. He descended the stage, and after some inquiries, his expression suddenly became extremely strange. Tong Lin was actually having public sex in the bushes right outside the entrance. Just how many fucking years have you not seen a woman that you have such a fierce craving? The red-haired young man hurriedly returned to the stage, and whispered lowly by Changsun Liang's ear. He had not even finished his words when Changsun Liang couldn't help but look furious. He almost slammed his hand on the table and stood up in indignant rage. That bastard, Tong Lin, was actually having public sex in his garden? Furthermore, it had become a publicly known fact? Wasn't this a public humiliation to him? How outrageously bold of him! It could not be said that Changsun Liang's composure was weak. This matter was indeed infuriating. It was just like someone had purposely crapped in your bed. Whose face would not turn dark at that? However, Changsun Liang did not fly into a temper. He only acted as if he had not discovered this matter, and greeted his guests. He was the Holy Sun, destined to inherit the position of sect master in future, so he was naturally an expert of guiding the mood. Very soon, he made everyone forget the matter of Tong Lin, and the topics of conversations were within his control. Changsun Liang was very interested in the Empress. After all, this was the only young king tier that was capable of matching him. Furthermore, her identity was very mysterious, and she could possibly be the holy daughter of some great sect. Just ask, who would not like such a woman whose natural talent was nature-defying and had a noble status, a perfect figure, and an unmatched bearing? Even if she had not shown her face, the Empress had already conquered the hearts of innumerable people. Fairy Luan Xing, after we finish later, would you be interested in studying the art of cultivation with me? Changsun Liang was not reserved at all, and began a fierce offensive towards the Empress. The Empress couldn't even be bothered to pay him any regard. If Changsun Liang had said that he wanted to spar with her, she might be more interested in battling. Ling Han laughed and said, "My Luan never spends time alone with strangers. If Brother Changsun is insistent, I can do so on her behalf." "You? How would you do so on her behalf?" Changsun Liang showed a sliver of displeasure. The words "my Luan" pierced his heart painfully. But what could be done? What position did he have to refute Ling Han's words? A thought flashed in his head, and he immediately had an idea. He turned to look at the red-haired young man, and communicated a message through his divine sense. Then he smiled and said, "In a meeting of us cultivators, how could we not have any spars and competitions of martial arts? The Holy Sun speaks true." Everyone nodded, naturally not daring to undermine his plans. "Ling Han, I challenge you." The red-haired young man immediately stood up and called out towards Ling Han. Ling Han was surprised. At first, he only wanted to be a quiet young man, have some food and wine, and meet the young prodigies of Black Moon City. But someone actually wanted to challenge him, and he didn't show his true prowess yesterday, so others thought he would make a good target. "Sure." He nodded, all smiles. "Qi Long, be appropriate in your strikes. Do not kill anyone," Changsun Liang said to the red-haired young man. The red-haired young man understood. This was Changsun Liang's command. As long as he did not kill anyone, there was no need for him to hold anything back. He nodded and respectfully replied, "Yes, Lord Holy Sun." He leaped out of the main hall and called out, "Ling Han, come out for a battle." Ling Han picked up a mouthful of food with his chopsticks and sipped some wine first. Then he turned to the Empress and said, "Wife, I will be back soon." The Empress nodded gently, and then took the initiative to kiss him. This scene caused everyone to almost die of envy. At first, they had thought that the Empress was a beauty of ice that was cold and proud. Yet they had never thought that she would smile in such a dazzling manner for a man, as gentle as a breeze. This guy who has gotten so fucking lucky. Go and die quickly. Even Changsun Liang could not control his expression from darkening. His hands balled tightly into fists. He felt an urge to commit murder. Ling Han pushed the table away, stood, and slowly walked out of the main hall. At this time, everyone also flooded out in droves. They wanted to personally see how Ling Han was going to be utterly beaten and thrashed, or they would not be able to suppress this fury in their hearts. They would be burnt to the extent of suffering severe injury if that was the case. The Empress walked lightly and elegantly. Her bearing was incredibly strong, and no one dared to walk into the vicinity of 9 meters from her. There was an exception. Changsun Liang quickly walked forwards, and walked side by side with the Empress. His face held an expression of shock. Sometimes, there was no need for any actual exchange of blows between elites, and they would be able to distinguish the strength of the other upon contact with their aura. The Empress was really very strong. So strong that he did not even have the absolute certainty that he could defeat her. This did not make him jealous, but instead filled him with a boundless adoration for her. How could an ordinary and common woman be qualified to be by his side? This was the woman that he had always been waiting for, his destined partner. Ling Han and the red-haired young man stood about 30 meters away from each other. The structures on this floating island were especially sturdy, and were completely capable of sustaining the impact caused by Genesis tears, so they did not need to battle in the skies. Everyone was filled with confidence in the red-haired young man. Though he was only Changsun Liang's attendant, Being capable of becoming Changsun Liang's attendant was enough proof of his strength. Even if an ordinary Saint King knelt on the ground and begged, Changsun Liang would not even give him a second look. 3 moves, the red-haired young man declared proudly. If he went all out, he could light up 71 holes on the hold pillar, which was not much inferior to many of the elites who had come today. Giving himself a limit of 3 moves was already giving himself an extremely wide space of allowance. Yuan Xingping, Dan Yujing, Bianjia, and the others were all looking at Ling Han. From a certain aspect, they were of the same camp with Ling Han, so they naturally did not hope that Ling Han would lose. Yet the fact that Ling Han managed to come here was completely because of his connection with the Empress, so how could others trust in his battle prowess? They hoped that he could withstand the full 3 moves. If he was defeated at the first blow, then even they would feel embarrassed. Ling Han chuckled and said, "Since you have already said 3 moves, then let it be 3 moves." Everyone did not know what his words meant. Only the Empress understood that Ling Han would only defeat his opponent by the 3rd move. First move, the red-haired young man moved. He tapped out a finger from a far distance. Boom! A tiny flame surged out and turned into a furious arrow that shot swiftly towards Ling Han at an incredibly quick speed. The bloodline of the dragon tribe flowed in his veins. By nature, he was an expert in using fire. The power of this fiery arrow was very frightening. Ling Han smiled slightly and blew out a breath of air towards the fiery arrow. With a pop, the fiery arrow had been extinguished. He said, "Today is not my birthday, so there is no need to make me blow out any candles." Yeah. Everyone was also surprised. No one had thought that Ling Han's strength was actually so powerful, being able to extinguish the red-haired man's attack with a single strike, which was hard to believe or accept. The red-haired young man was also slightly stunned, but did not think too much of it. The first strike was only a probe. He formed his hands into claws and said, "Then come take my second strike." Boom! A powerful aura surged out of his body, and his spine protruded as if it had become a giant dragon. Heavenly Dragon Furious Claws. He moved, his 2 hands pressing out. Immediately, multiple dragon scales covered them, and they had become the claws of a dragon. They were as long as 15 meters as they slashed towards Ling Han. A true dragon would soar above the 9 heavens, and was praised as the strongest divine beast. This was not just mere words. Multiple patterns of great Tao appeared on his dragon claws, and the power of regulation was channeled through them, so the mere sight of them would make anyone's heart shudder. This young man, no matter where he was, could be called a prodigy. But he was only the attendant of Changsun Liang in this place. Ling Han smiled slightly. Darkness of the paramount night spread out, enshrouding the red-haired young man completely. Under the boundless darkness, no one could see the red-haired young man anymore. Even Changsun Liang was no exception, and he showed a hint of shock. He couldn't help but ponder. If it was he that was fighting with Ling Han, and he was currently trapped by the darkness, how would he get out of this dilemma? Pong! In a mere instant, the red-haired young man had already charged out of the darkness, which made Changsun Liang involuntarily feel abashed, and he thought that he had made too big a fuss over a minor issue. Even Qi Long had so easily charged out, so what more when it was him? But the smile that had just appeared on his lips was immediately withdrawn, and his eyes narrowed slightly, because the red-haired young man had already charged over, yet the course of his attack had been diverted. At first, it was heading towards Ling Han, but now it was charging towards the side, and could not even touch even a corner of Ling Han's robes. The red-haired young man's second strike was rendered unsuccessful once more. Everyone was stunned. If Ling Han had seriously resolved the red-haired young man's attack, then everyone could believe it no matter how strong his abilities were. But he had simply blown out a breath of air and created a darkness to resolve his attacks, and this was completely baffling to the others. Unfathomable depths. Could it be that he was also a super genius? Third strike. The red-haired young man could already feel the pressure. He had struck 2 consecutive times, yet was not able to even sound out Ling Han's true strength. In this third strike, he definitely had to be cautious. He began to build up power for a strong move, dragon chi ascending all over his body. Pa pa pa. His clothes were forcibly burst, but there was no need to worry that he would expose himself, because his body was already covered with a thick layer of dragon scales. Ascending Dragon Strike. This was his strongest and most powerful move. Through burning his ancestral bloodline, he could deliver an earth-shattering blow. Could be said that, with the explosive power of this move, he could even match an elite who could light up 80 holes. Of course, he could only maintain such a state for 3 breaths' time at most. Charge! He charged towards Ling Han, and with his furious shout, the roar of a dragon rang out through the heaven and earth. Ling Han did not dodge or evade. When the red-haired young man pounced over, he stretched out his hand in a grab, and already grabbed the red-haired young man's neck. With a casual shake of his hand, at least half the bones in the red-haired young man's body was broken, and his limbs were instantly drooping like he was a dead man, no longer having the slightest bit of battle prowess left. 3 moves, he said with a smile, and then he threw the red-haired young man at Changsun Liang's feet with a casual toss. Only now did everyone know what Ling Han meant when he agreed to limit the battle to 3 moves. With his strength, he was completely capable of defeating the red-haired young man in a single move. Yuan Xingping and Dan Yujing became cautious at the same time. Though they, too, could defeat the red-haired young man, they would definitely not have done it as easily as Ling Han had. This was a strong foe. Previously, they had worried that Ling Han was not strong enough, which would make them embarrassed as well, and now they felt that Ling Han was too strong, so he would become a threat to them. A flash of anger involuntarily flickered in Changsun Liang's eyes. Ling Han tossed the man right in front of him. What was he trying to say? Was this a demonstration of force? Lord Holy Sun, you have to give me justice. Just at this moment, a person forcibly pushed his way through the crowd, his face filled with grievance. It was Tong Lin. Changsun Liang's fury was irrepressible in the first place, and now, seeing the sudden appearance of Tong Lin, he couldn't help but vent all his fury on the latter. Immediately, he shot out a palm strike. Pa! Tong Lin was immediately rendered into a rain of blood, both his form and spirit destroyed. This guy was really an unlucky fool. If Tong Lin still had awareness after death, he would definitely be very depressed. Why did Changsun Liang kill him? There was completely no logic to it. He had been awoken by the commotion created by the battle between Ling Han and the red-haired young man. The moment he awoke, he discovered his embarrassing state, hurriedly drew out some clothing to change into from his spatial god tool, and anxiously ran over to tell on Ling Han. He was sure that Changsun Liang would definitely demand justice for his sake, but he had never imagined that Changsun Liang would kill him with a single palm strike without another word. He was really unlucky to the extreme. Blood was still splashing in the air, and a few drops sprayed onto Lu Muyu's face, causing her running steps to come to an abrupt stop. Only now did she realize that Tong Lin had died, and he had actually been killed with a single palm strike from Changsun Liang. What's going on? Her face had turned completely pale from fear, her legs trembling, fearing that Changsun Liang would follow up with another blow and kill her as well. Lord Holy Sun, spare me. Lord Holy Sun, spare me. She knelt, her tears pouring like rain. She was indeed a completely unreasonable, incredibly ferocious person, but that would depend on who was in front of her. Changsun Liang showed a hint of disdain. This definitely had to be the cheap slut who had engaged in public sex with Tong Lin. Such a whore was actually able to come to his residence? Scram! He rebuked loudly. Yes, yes, yes. Lu Muyu did not even dare to say another word, and hurriedly turned around and ran. Changsun Liang took a deep breath, regaining control of his emotions. Only then did he realize that he had gone too far with his actions. No matter what, the Tong clan was a 4th severance force. But since he was already killed, he would not keep thinking about it with his personality. He looked towards Ling Han, a slight smile appearing on his lips. He began to clap loudly. Exciting, truly exciting. Everyone was speechless. You were so furious that you killed Tong Lin, and now you are clapping your hands in praise. This was really too fake. However, this person was the holy son of the Black Moon sect, so who would dare approach and rebuke him? Changsun Liang continued, "Is there anyone who would like to spar with this person?" No one answered. From Ling Han's previous performance, he was definitely of the same level as Yuan Xingping and Dan Yujing, his strength extremely overwhelming and strong. Though Black Moon City was a 2-star city, and there were many more prodigies here than in a 1-star city, there really were not many the likes of Yuan Xingping. Moreover, even if they were, they might not have the absolute certainty that they could defeat Ling Han. No wonder the incredibly proud empress had chosen him. This was definitely not an idiot that only had his looks going for him. Changsun Liang's expression was slightly awkward. There was actually no one that was willing to move out? Who was he? Could it be that he would have to personally stand against Ling Han? Changsun Liang humphed in displeasure. They didn't even want to give this little bit of face to the one and only holy son. Ho, as untalented as I am, I would like to ask for some guidance from this brother. A young man emerged from the crowd. He first bowed slightly towards Changsun Liang before turning to face Ling Han. Immediately, Changsun Liang's expression looked considerably better. This young man was the prodigy of the Xiang clan, Xiang Wenkuan. He was very strong and capable enough to gain his approval. With Xiang Wenkuan moving out, this matter was assuredly resolved. Ling Han faintly and said, "Come on then, I will give you some guidance." Xiang Wenkuan showed a hint of anger. When he said guidance, he was only being polite. He had not thought that Ling Han would take him literally. Humph, he was just a country bumpkin that had come from a tiny 1-star city. He really had an exaggerated opinion of his strength. It made sense. After he had gained some strength, he was naturally invincible in a small city, and thought that there were no other elites in this world, and became unbearably arrogant. What ignorance! Then let us fight. He did not bother to waste words, and made a hooking motion with his finger towards Ling Han. Ling Han smiled slightly, raised a single finger, and said, "One move." Hiss, everyone inhaled sharply. You wanted to take Xiang Wenkuan down with a single strike? Where had this courage come from? On the contrary, Xiang Wenkuan was so angered he smiled, and declared, "Then let it be one strike." He stared at Ling Han, his origin power channeling. A sword-shaped mark appeared in the middle of his brow, and a primitive, ancient intimidation radiated out, making everyone feel as if a large rock was weighing down on their hearts, which was incredibly uncomfortable. He had used a strong move. This was the power of his battle prowess, being able to draw on the powers of their ancient ancestors, increasing his battle prowess greatly. Victory with a single strike. Ling Han crossed his arms behind his back and allowed his opponent to prepare for his powerful move, looking like he had completely no intention of moving to interrupt him. Nor did he plan to make any preparations for his own powerful attack. Arrogant, everyone thought. That was Xiang Wenkuan here, and even if it was Yuan Xingping or Dan Yujing facing him, they would have to be extremely cautious. If they did not go all out, they would definitely be obliterated and turn into dust in an instant. Frozen divine sword, Xiang Wenkuan exclaimed, and tapped on his forehead. Shio, that sword-shaped mark actually turned into a divine sword that slashed out. Suddenly, the temperature in the surroundings began to drop madly. Everyone in the area felt as if their blood was about to freeze in their veins, and when they wanted to move about, they discovered that their limbs had already been frozen stiff, with a thick layer of ice having formed on their bodies. Hiss, this was only a secondary effect, and its might was already so frightening. If one was really struck by this frozen divine sword, would there be any chance of survival? This strike was so fast that it was indescribable. But Ling Han smiled faintly and calmly tapped out a single finger, which just happened to tap on the tip of the sword. So accurate! So fast! Everyone exclaimed in shock in their minds, but then they immediately shook their heads. The coldness that this sword exuded was so terrifying, and you actually met it with your bare hand. Wasn't that simply courting death? Pa! The icy sword immediately shattered, but the coldness had been completely transferred to Ling Han, freezing him instantly. Xiang Wenkuan involuntarily showed an expression of pride. This was the consequence of angering him. Boom! A flame ignited from Ling Han's body, and the layer of ice instantly melted. Ling Han's finger continued to tap out, growing to the size of a mountain peak, and pressed down on Xiang Wenkuan. Xiang Wenkuan paled in shock. The range that this finger covered was really too wide. There was absolutely no way for him to dodge. He could only explode with his full power and throw a series of punches at the skies. Boom, 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 punches landed on that finger one after another, yet they did not have the slightest effect. The giant finger fell without obstruction. Boom! Xiang Wenkuan's figure had immediately disappeared. When Ling Han lifted his finger, they could see that Xiang Wenkuan was already sprawled out on the ground. One move, he had indeed used only a single move. Even as strong as Xiang Wenkuan was, he had already prepared a long time to build up enough power to unleash a strong move, yet he had still been dealt with by a single move. Just how wide was the gap in power between the two of them? It should be known that Ling Han had not made any preparations at all, and had only very casually flicked out a finger. This time, even Changsun Liang was moved. He looked at Ling Han and said, 3 eras ago, a Mao Dai appeared in Dark Moon City. He swept aside all other young prodigies, and was known as a supreme prodigy. If it was up to me, I would say that you are much stronger than Mao Dai had been at that time. This was a very high assessment. At the time, Mao Dai had defeated all the Saint Kings, and emerged as a powerful force of his own. Even now, it was still discussed enthusiastically. This was indeed a super genius, and even the Fu clan had the intention to take him in. His future achievement would definitely not be limited to merely the 4th severance. But Changsun Liang actually said that Ling Han was stronger than Mao Dai had been. Wasn't that a little exaggerated? You are worthy of having a battle with me, Changsun Liang declared proudly. He was already standing at the peak stage of Saint King tier, and was only waiting for the severing mundane pool to open, and he would be able to sever his mortal bonds and become immortal. In a battle of equals, he was confident that he was unmatched. Ling Han smiled and said, I have always been an easygoing person. Since you wish for a battle, then I'll play with you. Play? Who would dare say that they could play around in a fight with Changsun Liang? Mao Dai was indeed a super genius, but it was not that there were absolutely no other prodigies that could be his equals. For example, in Dark Moon City itself, there was a Ding Yaolong. It was just that there was a whole clan behind Ding Yaolong, so it was definitely impossible that he could gain the full patronage of the Fu clan or the Black Moon sect, unlike Mao Dai, who could become a member of the Fu clan or the Black Moon sect just by marrying into these forces. Yes, if Mao Dai had suppressed his cultivation level to the level of the Genesis tier, it was definitely impossible that he could be a match for Changsun Liang. This was a rare prodigy that would be hard to come by even in several tens of thousands of eras, and no one knew how strong his battle prowess would be against an opponent of equal cultivation level. That was because there had never been any one of his peers that could force him to show his full battle prowess. Changsun Liang chuckled. He was seated in a high position, so there naturally was no need for him to drop down to the same level. He crossed his arms behind his back and slowly walked out. He said, I'll let you have the first 3 moves. I'll let you have the first 10 moves. Ling Han grinned. Changsun Liang's smile involuntarily froze. This was really arrogance to the extreme. He did not speak further, and pointed out a finger at Ling Han. Wang. A frightening pressure surged out, as if the heavens themselves were about to collapse. Ling Han similarly pointed a finger, meeting Changsun Liang's incoming attack. Peng, the 2 attacks immediately crumbled. He did not follow it up with another strike, but rather kept to the promise he had made previously, letting Changsun Liang have the first 10 moves. After this exchange, there was no more noise to be heard from the surroundings. Ling Han had already shown very powerful strength, easily defeating both the red-haired young man and Xiang Wenkuan, but there was still not a single person that thought that he was capable of standing against Changsun Liang. Changsun Liang, an invincible existence among his peers. But now, Ling Han actually blocked a blow from Changsun Liang. Though it had only been a casual strike, it was clear that Ling Han had also not used his full strength either. Could it be that a 3rd Supreme King tier would appear in Black Moon City? Changsun Liang smiled and flicked out a finger. Xiao, another flash of saber ray slashed over. Ling Han shot out a flash of sword qi, easily countering this second attack from Changsun Liang. 3 moves, 4 moves, 5 moves, very quickly 10 moves had passed. Changsun Liang again crossed his arms behind his back and said, "The 10 moves are over. Make your move." Ling Han did not continue to be reserved and leaped out. He did not use any celestial technique and was similarly resorting to simple martial arts in his attacks. Changsun Liang dodged and parried, but did not counterattack, similarly letting him use 10 moves first. Changsun Liang was proud and would not condescend to take advantage of Ling Han. After 10 moves, the two of them showed an expression of seriousness. Though neither of them had used their full strength just now, or had engaged in a fierce exchange of blows, in a battle of elites, how could it be that they could not see through to each other's depths with just these few moves? A tough opponent. This was the label that they had tagged on the other. Wind-piercing finger. Changsun Liang pressed a finger firmly down on Ling Han. Though he had also shot out his finger like this before, he had not channeled any celestial technique. And now, when he pointed out his finger, the incredibly dazzling light of Great Tao shone brilliantly, shooting out towards Ling Han. Ling Han dared not be careless. Though he was sure that he was completely capable of taking on this kind of attack head-on with his physique, if there was no need, he did not want others to know exactly how strong his physique was. He shot out a punch using extermination lightning. Hong, long, long. His fist was completely covered with lightning, and countered Changsun Liang's attack violently. Z. The light of Great Tao split apart the sea of lightning, but the power of lightning dispersed all its might at the same time. Shua. The sea of lightning split into 2 halves and passed by on either side of Changsun Liang, unable to create the slightest bit of damage. The deeper probe that both sides had sent out still ended in a tie. This caused their expressions to become even more cautious. Aside from the Empress, this was the first powerful opponent that Ling Han had encountered among his peers, filling him with a blazing fighting spirit. He took the initiative to attack, his figure shooting out. Using his fingers like he would a sword, he used the lightning sword technique. This was incredibly quick, and Changsun Liang was caught unawares. Suddenly, he appeared to be a bit rushed. However, he truly lived up to his name as the king tier of the younger generation. Though he was caught off guard, he did not panic. He shot out both fists, delivering one attack after another, and stopping Ling Han from coming any closer to him. After only a few moves, he gradually relaxed, having accustomed himself to this kind of attack. Such adaptability caused even Ling Han to nod mentally. The fact that he could be known as a supreme prodigy was truly based on genuine strength. However, if that was not the case, what interesting would there be about it? "It's my turn." Changsun Liang released a battle cry and suddenly spat out a mouthful of air, which turned into countless blades of wind that streaked towards Ling Han. These wind blades were incredibly frightening. The light of Great Tao was glinting among them, and there were multiple patterns flickering. Its destructive power was practically unimaginable. Everyone was stunned. So as it turned out, Changsun Liang had not just been on the defensive just now, but was also taking the opening to build up power in preparation for a counterattack. Otherwise, such a powerful attack definitely could not have been unleashed just like this. Ling Han only acted as if he had not seen them, and continued to charge out towards Changsun Liang. In the instant that the wind blades were just about to attack him, he used the banishing technique on himself. In a mere blink of an eye, his figure reappeared. With the level of control he presently had on the banishing technique, this separate dimension was already incredibly sturdy. At least, it was not something that Changsun Liang could penetrate with a single attack. He had already charged right in front of Changsun Liang and shot out a punch at the latter. Iron shield. Changsun Liang humphed, his hands crossing over his chest, sealing off this punch from Ling Han. Ling Han was surprised. He was actually unable to penetrate Changsun Liang's defenses with a single punch. The latter was really quite strong. Changsun Liang quickly followed up with a counterattack. A flash of golden light shot out from his eyes, sweeping out towards Ling Han's face. Ling Han used lightning flash, and his figure swiftly retreated, dodging this attack. Everyone was watching so avidly that they were holding their breath. In the short time of a few breaths, Ling Han and Changsun Liang had already exchanged a good few attacks, and whenever it was one of their turns to take the offensive, everyone would think that the other could no longer hold up, but the result was the complete opposite. Not only had he held up, he even took the opening to release his own counterattack. What a terrifying pair. They really were too strong. Changsun Liang being so strong was within their expectations. Even in the Fu clan, it would probably be very hard for this kind of prodigy to find an opponent that could match him among his peers. But why was Ling Han also this strong? This was illogical. This is great. Changsun Liang's fighting spirit had also been ignited, and he was shooting out one celestial technique after another with ease. He had touched upon practically any kind of regulations. It was really unknown exactly which regulation he had focused on. Ling Han had also grasped a number of celestial techniques himself. His interest was spiked as he continued to battle, and he used the immovable deity metal body mystical power. His 6 arms appeared at the same time, channeling several celestial techniques all at the same time. His battle prowess had increased tenfold. Changsun Liang did not continue to be reserved, either. His head of black locks shot skywards, and a small figure walked out of the middle of his forehead. It was only the size of a fist, and was brandishing 2 divine swords that were only as long as an inch, and rapidly sliced towards Ling Han. Though this figure was small and the swords were short, it filled Ling Han with great wariness. Putting aside having the divine swords land on him directly, he did not even want to be touched by the sword light. "That is buried ghost sword," someone exclaimed in shock, his face completely pale. Buried ghost sword was not a true treasured tool, but rather a secret technique. It was rumored that Changsun Liang had obtained it in an ancient site, and he was the only one who could cultivate this technique. That was because when he entered that ancient site, his spirit had been strengthened by an ancient object, or rather fused with it. Anyways, even the great elites of the Black Moon sect could not understand what was going on. All in all, after cultivating this celestial technique, a small figure would appear from the middle of the forehead, brandishing 2 swords, and its might was incredibly frightening. One only had to sustain a single strike, and it was able to directly destroy his soul and send him straight to the underworld. It was capable of even burying ghosts, what more mere humans. When the buried ghost sword appeared, everyone could feel waves of anxiety and terror. It was like there was a saber that was held against their necks, and their spirits could be destroyed and lives taken at any time. They all involuntarily activated a defensive origin power, but they still did not feel secure enough, and wanted nothing more than to set up several hundred formations in their surroundings to protect themselves. Changsun Liang charged over. That small figure led the way, brandishing its twin swords, and throwing out flash after flash of gorgeous sword rays. Ling Han stretched out a hand and pressed down. Darkness of the paramount night unfurled, trapping Changsun Liang. Xiao, yet the small figure was completely unaffected, and charged out of the darkness, its twin swords striking out at Ling Han. Ling Han threw out a fist, but it was as if there was no attack that could touch the tiny figure. It was actually completely unaffected, and continued to wave its twin swords in a strike. This was a manifestation of the spirit, and would not be affected with mere power. Ling Han showed a hint of a smile, and a fierce pride also rose up within him. "Then let's have a duel of our spirits." Lightning surged all around him, but upon a closer look, it was not something solid, but rather shadowy images that had been manifested from the regulation of lightning. Ling Han had refined a considerable amount of heavenly tribulation fluid. Beneath celestial level, this could be considered the strongest attack. When he had drunk it, not only had it caused a tremendous impact on his physical body, his spirit had also been tempered alongside it. It could be said that every time he drank the heavenly tribulation fluid and comprehended the regulation of lightning, that would be the time that his spirit would be undergoing a test, and his spirit had been tempered by the indestructible heaven scroll, so it was very sturdy, and steadily controlled this violent power of the heavenly tribulation. And now, his spirit also possessed the power of the heavenly tribulation. "Come on." With a thought, His spirit also took the form of a tiny figure that looked exactly like him. The tiny figure clenched its hands into fists and greeted the other tiny figure that was wielding twin swords with its own attacks. Pong! 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 The two tiny figures battled fiercely. Because they were both spirits, they could exchange blows. This was a different kind of battle, but it was also more dangerous because this was a manifestation of the spirits. Though they were not their complete spirits, as long as the slightest damage was caused, that would definitely cause massive injury to themselves. With a battle cry, Chang Sun Liang had torn through the darkness and appeared. As the holy son of a sect, who was also a young king tier that would only appear once in millions and millions of years, how could he be so easily trapped? Ling Han charged over and battled fiercely with Chang Sun Liang. It was clear that there were only two of them, yet they had separated out into two different battlefields, and both sides were extremely intense and extremely dangerous. The spirit was the soul of the physical body. Without the spirit, a cultivator was merely an empty shell, and the physical body was the vehicle of the spirit. Without the physical body, the spirit would have no roots and no home. Everyone could feel their hair rise on ends as they watched. If they were scratched by either Ling Han's or Chang Sun Liang's attack, or struck by either of the two tiny figures, then wouldn't their physical bodies be shattered, and even their souls obliterated? In short, if it had been them fighting, they would have died who knew how many times by now. Yet Ling Han and Chang Sun Liang kept throwing out ultimate moves. The two of them had cultivated every cultivation level underneath celestial level to its utter perfection. So the strength of their battle prowess was not only unimaginable to ordinary people, it was also unexpectedly difficult to decide who was stronger between the two of them. Ling Han's strength lay in the fact that he had merged the regulations of the two realms in the ancient realm, which allowed his battle prowess to far exceed others in at least the Genesis tier, while Chang Sun Liang had the advantage of a minor level. By now, it was unknown how many billions of stars he had formed, possessing a complete advantage in terms of pure power. Both of them had their own strengths which just happened to cancel out each other, so the battle could not be resolved. It was rare for the two of them to encounter a strong opponent, and as they continued to fight, they actually began to feel they had encountered someone that was a worthy match for them. However, they were too proud. Even if they would be shaking their hands and make peace after the battle, they were determined to decide who was the stronger one between the two of them. I am the strongest! Sword light shot into the skies, and celestial techniques dazzled the world. This battle did not continue for too long because it was too dangerous. The slightest move could cause severe injury. After only slightly less than 1 hour, both of their figures swayed, and they both stepped back. The battle between themselves was not decided, but their tiny spirits gave each other a blow. Ling Han sustained a sword slash, and Chang Sun Liang's tiny figure was struck by a punch. The spirit shared a common origin with the main body. Chang Sun Liang's face instantly turned pale and spat out a mouthful of blood, his expression becoming extremely dispirited. Ling Han, too, trembled lightly, but his spirit had been tempered with the indestructible Heaven's Scroll, so his ability to withstand blows was naturally very strong. In truth, after a moment of discomfort, the feeling had passed. But now, he and Chang Sun Liang had become friends through their battle, so he decided to give him some face, and forced himself to spit out a mouthful of blood, which made his expression considerably much worse. Let's call this battle a tie, all right? Chang Sun Liang suppressed his injuries, and grinned at Ling Han. In truth, he still had some powerful moves he had not used, but the price for using them would be too high. Furthermore, it was not a life-or-death battle where they were completely putting their lives on the line. Now that he had formed a good opinion of Ling Han through their fight, he naturally could not do so just for the sake of winning a battle. Ling Han broke into a grin and replied, "Sure." Chang Sun Liang walked over and enthusiastically slung an arm over his shoulder and declared, "Let's go and share a drink. Let's drink." The two of them both laughed loudly, walking towards the main hall. Others were all confused by this scene. Just now, they were fighting so fiercely as if they wanted nothing more than to kill the other. But why were they suddenly rubbing shoulders like this now, and looking like they were good friends? This was absolutely baffling. That was because they did not understand how lonely true king tiers and prodigies felt. It was difficult to find someone that could match them among their peers, and now they had finally met someone that they could have a full-out battle with. How elated would they be at this? The Empress showed a hint of displeasure. "Are you trying to steal my man?" She quickly walked forwards. Changsun Liang noticed her, and turned around with a smile. "Sister-in-law, I had been rash just now. If I have offended you, please, show." The Empress did not allow him to finish his words at all. She had already grabbed him, and casually tossed him away. Then, she placed Ling Han's hand on her waist, as if she was announcing that this man belonged to her. Everyone was dumbfounded. Just how frightening was her strength. Though Changsun Liang was injured, and though he had not expected that the Empress would suddenly make a move, being able to throw Changsun Liang out, was there a second person that could accomplish this feat? This mysterious beauty was the true top elite beneath the severing mundane tier. Regarding this fact, Ling Han was in full agreement. Even if he depended on his strong physique now, he could only battle the Empress to a tie at most. After all, he was a minor level inferior to her. However, when he, too, had ascended to Saint King tier, then even if the Empress and Changsun Liang joined forces, he would still be able to suppress the two of them. Changsun Liang got back to his feet with gritted teeth. He had a grimace on his face but was not angered. It was really difficult to get angry at the Empress. Changsun Liang was indeed a very proud man. There was nothing that could be done about it. He was the holy son of the Black Moon sect, and also a king tier that had removed himself from worldly affairs. It was very normal for him to be prideful. Furthermore, it was indeed difficult for any ordinary person to be worthy of his serious attention. But in his bones, he was a very lonely person. That was because everyone was inferior to him, so how was he supposed to make any friends? The fact that Ling Han managed to battle him to a tie, and the Empress was even stronger than him, not only caused his fighting spirit to burn brightly, but also made it very easy for him to accept these two people as his close friends. However, the Empress had a strong tendency to become jealous, so he could only rearrange the places of Ling Han and the Empress so they would sit facing each other. Yet he did not dare ask to be seated beside Ling Han, fearing that he would be tossed out by the Empress again. He still wanted to keep some face. The banquet continued, and after the great battle previously, everyone felt dizzy and dazzled, and could not calm their racing hearts. Meanwhile, Yuan Xingping and Dan Yujing wore pained expressions. It was only a battle, but it had already decided Ling Han's position. Who would be able to defeat such a king tier in the competition? Putting aside that 10 were not enough, even if the over 200 teams ganged up on him, it was still a question whether they would be able to deal with him. They could only hope that they would not encounter him too soon, or their result would definitely be elimination. After drinking for a while, Changsun Liang began to explore the art of cultivation with Ling Han. He was indeed a prodigy. If there was any area that he was inferior to Ling Han in, that was that he had not cultivated the indestructible heaven scroll, nor did he have the opportunity to merge the regulations of two realms in the ancient realm. But in the area of comprehension of Great Tao, he had his own unique understanding, giving Ling Han inspiration through comprehension via analogy. This discussion lasted a good few hours, but those in the surroundings did not have the slightest bit of impatience. This was insights about cultivation of two king tiers. It was fine even if they could not understand them now. They only had to remember the information, and it would definitely be of great help to them in future if they could digest even the slightest bit. It is unfortunate, Brother Ling, that you have not reached Saint King tier now. There is only 1 year's time, and you would not be able to make it for the opening of the Severing Mundane Pool. Changsun Liang said, his expression filled with pity. The location for severing mundane must be carefully chosen. Severing one's mortal bonds at different places would directly affect your future battle prowess. Thus, it is better to wait for more than 10 million years than to take this step in a hurry. This was priceless advice. It was not that Changsun Liang wanted Ling Han to break through to the severing mundane tier more than 10 million years later than himself. Instead, he was sincerely considering for Ling Han's sake. Ling Han only smiled. He had a great chance not only to be able to break through to the Saint King tier in this 1.5 years' time, but also possess enough accumulation to manage the feat of severing mundane. That was because he possessed the reincarnation tree. To others, it would be just over a year, but for him it was tens of thousands of years, which was more than enough time. Meanwhile, the Empress was not the slightest bit worried. She had always been filled with confidence in Ling Han. The red-haired young man had already regained consciousness. After some medical treatment, he could already move with ease, but he definitely did not dare battle anymore. That was because his bones had only been temporarily joined. If he fought again, they would definitely shatter. Suddenly, a slight commotion rose up outside the main hall. The red-haired young man hurriedly ran out to see what was going on. This was Celestial Cloud's island. Who would dare come here to make trouble? After a while, he returned and said to Changsun Liang, "Lord Holy Sun, the Tong clan's ancestor has come to visit personally and wishes to apologize to you. The descendant of his own clan had been killed, and as an elder, he actually came here to pay an apology?" That was natural. Changsun Liang was the Holy Sun and would become the sect master of the Black Moon sect in future. But Tong Lin actually dared to have public sex on Celestial Cloud's island. Naturally, if he had been killed by Changsun Liang, he deserved it. In fact, for the sake of avoiding being implicated, the Tong clan's ancestor would have to personally pay a visit to apologize. Changsun Liang thought for a slight moment and said, "Invite him in." Though he was the Holy Sun, he still had to give some face to a fourth Severance Grand Elder. The red-haired young man nodded and ran out to relay Changsun Liang's message. Another while later, a middle-aged man strode over. Though he had kept his aura under wraps, wherever he passed, those around could not help but hold their breaths, feeling as if the heavens themselves were about to collapse. This was the Tong clan's ancestor. Because one would gain a limitless lifespan after advancing into the Severing Mundane tier, it was natural that he would not age. Thus, whatever he looked like when he entered into Severing Mundane tier, he would continue to maintain this appearance, unless one encountered the Immortal Tribulation. Then he would age incredibly and be inflicted with ineradicable disease. Just looking at the appearance of the Tong clan's ancestor, one would know how astonishing his natural talent in cultivation was. He had broken through at a very young age. Changsun Liang stood up with clasped hands and said, "Elder Tong." The other man was a 4-star elder, and though his standing in the sect was inferior to his seniority and strength were clear, so he still had to give him some face. The Tong clan's ancestor also clasped his hands and loudly said, "Greetings, Holy Sun." The two of them exchanged pleasantries for a while, and the Tong clan's ancestor directly expressed the reason for his visit. He harshly denounced Tong Lin for a while, and expressed that it was a good thing that Changsun Liang had killed him, having killed a degenerate son for the Tong clan. After apologizing for the third time, he finally begged his leave and departed. However, when he left, he took Lu Muyu with him. It was possible that he was planning to vent his fury on this woman. It took two to tango. If Tong Lin wanted to have public sex, couldn't she have vowed to die rather than obey? Regarding Tong Lin's death, Ling Han naturally would not feel the slightest bit of pity, but Lu Muyu would definitely tell the truth, and by then, he would have made another enemy. Tong Lin had indeed been killed by Changsun Liang, but would the Tong clan dare to seek out Changsun Liang for revenge? So they naturally would turn on to Ling Han instead. After a day, the banquet finally ended. Changsun Liang commanded the red-haired young man to drive a carriage to send Ling Han and the Empress back, which was proof enough of their special treatment. When everyone returned, the events that happened during the banquet immediately spread throughout the entire Black Moon sect. As long as it was a Severing Mundane clan, all of them had heard of Ling Han's and the Empress's name. But in the relay station, there were only a rare few teams that knew how strong Ling Han was, and they did not broadcast it widely. The various great forces were all investigating Ling Han's and the Empress's origins. How could such prodigies have suddenly appeared just like this? Before they had clarified the circumstances, the various great forces did not dare casually set out conditions to gain their favor. What if these two people were the holy son and holy daughter of some great sect? Wouldn't their actions become a joke then? Ling Han and the Empress returned to their accommodations, and Mao Shuyu and the others ran over to find out what had happened. The floating islands were forbidden lands to them, But the more they were unable to go, the more curious they were about them. Ling Han felt amused. These people were the level of prodigies in the eyes of others, yet were actually as curious as little children now. Putting aside them, even Long Gaofei was very curious, and very much wanted to find out all the details. When they returned, he could pretend that he had visited the floating islands, which caused Ling Han to shake his head in humor. Only a day had passed, and Changsun Liang had actually come over, again discussing cultivation with Ling Han. This made Long Gaofei feel incredibly excited. The holy son of the Black Moon sect, the future sect master. If Dark Moon City. No, if the Long clan could make a connection with him, they would definitely be rich. At first, he planned to have some young sons of the Long clan court the Empress when they returned, but his decision had naturally been changed by now. Ling Han's value had suddenly soared, which caused him to treat him with incredible regard. You guys go on and talk slowly. It's fine no matter how long you want to discuss. I'll keep an eye on the time so that you won't miss the competition, he said, and even personally closed the doors behind him. The old man was all smiles, but he had just arrived at the courtyard when the doors of the courtyard were broken in, and an old man whose expression was filled with fury walked in. Long Gaofei's face immediately darkened. He actually dared to kick open their main doors? Didn't he know that the Lord Holy Sun was also here? If the Holy Sun was offended, who could bear this responsibility? How dare you? He shouted harshly. The elder who entered bore an expression filled with killing intent. He swept an eye over Long Gaofei and calmly commanded, "Tell that despicable brat, Ling Han, to come out." When Long Gaofei heard this, his expression became incredibly strange. This brat was a little too capable, wasn't he? He had already reminded everyone so many times previously that they had to keep a low profile and not to cause unnecessary trouble. But what did Ling Han do? He had silently become friends with Changsun Liang. This was a good thing, at least, but this man before his eyes was definitely not here to drink tea with Ling Han. This person was very strong. Long Gaofei frowned and asked, "Second severance?" The elder showed a hint of pride. "Tong clan, Tong Jinyun." The Tong clan had found out the truth from Lu Muyu's mouth, and they were naturally all enraged. As it turned out, Tong Lin had actually died in such a wronged manner, and had even compelled a fourth severance grand elder to humbly apologize to a Genesis tier for the sake of this matter. Even if Changsun Liang was the Holy Sun, this was still a disgrace. For the clan, the Tong clan's ancestor had borne with it. As the saying went, with a little forbearance, one would find calm and peace. But they had never thought that all this was a trap that someone had set. Just a minor character from a mere one-star city, and he actually caused the death of a member of the Tong clan, and even forced the Tong clan's ancestor to lower his head in apology. If they did not seek vengeance for this misdeed, how was the Tong clan going to remain in their circle? Thus Tong Jinyun had come. He was a second severance elite, which was enough to suppress Long Gaofei. If they sent out anyone too powerful, wasn't that giving Ling Han too much regard? So it is Lord Tong. Long Gaofei clasped his hands in respect. The fourth severance of severing mundane tier was equivalent to 4 great mountains. Ascending different peaks would mean possessing completely different status. Hence, even though the two of them only had a gap of a minor level between them, the actual gap between them was astonishing, whether it was in terms of status or strength. Don't say any more nonsense. Tell that despicable brat, Ling Han, to come out, Tong Jinyun declared darkly. He actually dared trick their Tong clan. He was really outrageously brazen. Today, no matter what, he would kill Ling Han, and let everyone know that the pride of the Tong clan could not be impinged upon. Long Gaofei was filled with confidence. Smiling calmly, he said, "At this time, Ling Han is accompanying an esteemed guest, so I'm afraid that he can't come out to see you, my lord." Tong Jinyun's eyes involuntarily widened in a glare. What a joke. As a mere Genesis tier brat, what esteemed guest could he possibly be receiving? In other words, what esteemed guest would have a more powerful background than him? No wonder he dared to set up a trap to harm their Tong clan. This brat was indeed arrogant. No, it was not just that despicable brat that was arrogant. This old geezer was also quite arrogant. Otherwise, how could he have taught such an arrogant junior? Are you brushing me off? Tong Jinyun questioned menacingly. All of a sudden, a heavy pressure weighed down. This glare was definitely enough to make any Genesis tier feel weak in the knees and completely lose all battle prowess, but even if Long Gaofei was no match for the other party, he was still a first Severance elite, so he could not possibly be intimidated with just a single look. He chuckled and replied, "Of course not. Ling Han is really entertaining an esteemed guest at this moment." "Oh, then I really would like to see how esteemed this esteemed guest is." Tong Jinyun felt his fury blazing. He decided internally that he would thrash that esteemed guest along with Ling Han as well. What esteemed guest? In his eyes, they were all trash. He strode out, and Long Gaofei naturally could not manage to stop him. He could only follow behind him. Pang! Tong Jinyun did not tell Long Gaofei to point out which room belonged to Ling Han either, but rather kicked open the doors of each room one after another. In the first room, Wei Bo looked back expressionlessly. In the second room, Qin Hanyu looked back expressionlessly. In the third room, everyone could hear the conversation that had commenced outside, so they were prepared and did not lose their heads in a panic. Yet when he kicked open the doors to the sixth room, Ding Xiaoqin's face was filled with resentment. He was too innocent here. He was archenemies with Ling Han, yet because of his connection with Ling Han he was implicated. He was really too wronged here. But he was praying secretly in his heart that Tong Jinyun could kill Ling Han with a single palm strike. There was only one room left. Pang! The doors to the room were kicked open, revealing the three people that were inside. There were 2 men and 1 woman, who were seated, facing each other, and were presently sipping tea and talking about something. "You guys are really quite calm and collected," Tong Jinyun humphed coldly and demanded, "This esteemed guest, turn around and let me have a look." Chang Sun Liang turned around as he asked, and looked at Tong Jinyun expressionlessly. Holy Sun! Tong Jinyun immediately gasped out in shock, his expression varying wildly. It was practically switching from one color to another in quick succession, such that no one could imagine that a human face could actually have so many expressions and switch expressions at such a rapid pace. Chang Sun Liang smiled calmly and said, "Now that you have seen this holy sun, what do you want to do?" Though he was only in Genesis tier, his status was clear. He was the gem of the Black Moon sect, bearing the hopes of all the powerful figures of the sect. If he was injured, even if it was a slight scratch on his finger, that would be enough to make the heavens collapse. With any dividing soul tier elite moving out, the Tong clan would instantly be razed to the ground, disappearing in the pages of history. By now, Tong Jinyun was really filled with bitter regret. How could he have possibly imagined that this esteemed guest would actually be Chang Sun Liang? How could a minor character from a 1-star city have possibly made a connection with the holy sun of the Black Moon sect? Furthermore, this was Chang Sun Liang himself who was personally paying a visit to Ling Han, and this was even more inconceivable. "I did not know the holy sun was here, and have caused much offense. Please forgive my offense, holy sun." Tong Jinyun could only apologize now. If Chang Sun Liang was really determined to deal with the Tong clan, even if Tong clan was a member of the Black Moon sect, so what? Chang Sun Liang calmly said, "If this holy sun were not here, you would simply barge in without any reservations. Lord Tong, you have to understand this is the territory of the sect, and not the private property of your Tong clan." These words were said harshly, scaring Tong Jinyun so much that he knelt down, no longer caring about any loss of face anymore. If Chang Sun Liang wanted to perform an in-depth investigation, it would not be a matter that only involved him, but would rather implicate the entire Tong clan. "Please forgive me, Lord Holy Sun." Chang Sun Liang did not show any anger or shock, and kept a calm and composed expression, displaying the amount of control that a person in noble standing would have. "Since you were the one who had kicked through the doors of this place, then it would be your responsibility to repair all of them. Lord Tong, are you convinced?" "Convinced? The Lord Holy Sun's words speak true. I am convinced." Tong Jinyun hurriedly lowered his head. Ling Han watched avidly. Should he go and get the label of a holy son himself as an intimidation tactic? Go on. Chang Sun Liang waved him off dismissively. Tong Jinyun quickly scrambled up from the ground and obediently went off to repair the doors. Seeing the old man repairing the doors that he had initially kicked through in an amateurish manner, everyone was gaping and dumbstruck. They felt as if they were about to go blind. Long Gaofei, meanwhile, was secretly pleased. Little guy, weren't you very arrogant just now? Go on and continue being arrogant, idiot. After repairing 10 doors, Tong Jinyun first apologized to Chang Sun Liang again, and only then did he leave with his tail between his legs. Chang Sun Liang smiled and said, Brother Ling, I should also leave. I offer you advance congratulations for obtaining the first place in this competition. Though there were still a few days before the competition would begin, the result was practically assured. He stood up, yet suddenly coughed out, and spat out a mouthful of black blood. Ling Han frowned and asked, Brother Changsun's injuries haven't recovered yet? Previously, his and Chang Sun Liang's spirits had exchanged blows and struck each other once. Ling Han came out of it practically unscathed, but Chang Sun Liang was not as freakish as he was, and his spirit had sustained severe injury. Such an injury wouldn't recover too soon. Furthermore, it was very difficult to use medicines to treat an injury to the spirit. Thankfully, this was the celestial realm, so saintly medicines were commonplace. He would definitely be able to recover after recuperating for a few months' time, and there was no need to worry that it would affect his venture to the severing mundane pool that would take place over a year later. But in the subsequent months, Chang Sun Liang's battle prowess definitely would not be able to reach its prime. Fortunately, he was a king tier himself, so even if he could only use half of his battle prowess, it would be enough to overwhelm all other Genesis tiers. This recovery ability of yours truly does make me envious. Chang Sun Liang shook his head. They had both sustained a strike, but looking at how energetic Ling Han was now, he didn't even look like he had been injured at all, did he? Chang Sun Liang had just left, and Ling Han had a strange expression on his face. He had genuinely touched the doorstep to a breakthrough. The benefits of discussing Dao with the other party were very large, especially with the pinnacle battle that had taken place a few days ago, which helped him settle a great amount of experience. After digesting this experience, he naturally took the final step in the category of immortal level. He headed to a deserted forest to receive his heavenly tribulation. Long tribulation clouds gathered densely. The heavenly tribulation of the celestial realm was much stronger than the heavenly tribulation of the ancient realm, its upper limit reaching as far up as celestial king tier. Ling Han did not dare be impudent, and obediently endured the tempering by the heavenly tribulation. He did not charge into the depths of the tribulation clouds. However, after entering into the celestial realm, his heavenly tribulation had become considerably more normal because there were actually a considerable number of freaks like him in the celestial realm. Half a day later, he had successfully endured the heavenly tribulation, and his godly bones had advanced another level, reaching the height of 1-star pseudo-divine metal. His present battle prowess was still far inferior to a First Severance Grand Elder's, but if a First Severance Grand Elder wanted to kill him, he could only slowly refine him through the power of regulations. If he wanted to kill him directly, it would only end in utter failure. There was actually no pinnacle level to the Genesis tier. Forming more than 10 billion stars was due to being incapable of breaking through to the severing mundane tier. No matter how many stars you formed, you would not be all that much stronger after advancing into the severing mundane tier. At the level of a small world, cultivators mainly focused on power because they were unable to touch regulations yet. When one had reached the ancient realm, the strength of their spirit would have increased, and the strength of the spirit would actually make it easier to grasp regulations. The stronger the regulations one had grasped, the sturdier your spirit would be. And by celestial level, the importance of regulations would far surpass power. This was the most powerful strength of celestials. If the physical body was destroyed, then he would only have to switch to another shell, and his battle prowess would not be very greatly affected. Of course, it was not the original body, so there would definitely be the problem of getting used to it. Battle prowess would not be very affected, but it was very possible that one would have cut off his path of further advancement in future. Thus, no matter how low-grade one's physical body and bloodline were, there was practically not a single cultivator that would be willing to give them up, switch to another body, and start all over again. The next step would be severing mundane tier. Ling Han took a deep breath. He only needed to advance into the severing mundane tier, and he would be able to lay claim to the label of elite in the celestial realm as well. It was unlike the Genesis tier, wherein no matter how excellently he performed, he would only be considered as having potential. Being a severing mundane ancestor meant having a limitless lifespan. One should know how difficult it was to take this step just merely due to this one fact. In the celestial realm, there were as many saints as dogs, and they were all over the place, but as for severing mundane ancestors, there were only a few dozen in a one-star city, and even in a two-star city there were only a few thousand. Compared with the enormous population, this number was really pitifully small. And now, who could be a match for me within the Genesis tier? Ling Han stroked his chin. Unfortunately, I am limited by my cultivation level, and am unable to grasp celestial-level regulations. Otherwise, I would be able to inscribe celestial-level formations in my body, and even a first Severance Grand Elder would possibly die at my hand. He was free at the moment anyways, so Ling Han inscribed even more Saint King tier formations inside his body, but no matter how many he inscribed, it was useless. The battle prowess they could show was actually a 10,000th of his own battle prowess. Just how fucking strong have I become? Ling Han himself was dazed. He had inscribed 999 Saint King tier great formations in his body, but they only totaled up to 1/10,000 of his own battle prowess. If Hunyo was still in Genesis tier, that would be great. I would be able to spar with her, and see what level of battle prowess the holy daughter of a top-tier sect would have. The Rock Palace was a Celestial King tier force, and Hunyo had also merged with the bloodline of the previous Imperial Empress as well as other miscellaneous items, so she was definitely in the level of top-tier holy sons and holy daughters. I've already come to the Celestial Realm for quite some time, but I still don't know if the Rock Palace is in the Eastern Celestial Realm or the Western Celestial Realm. What a failure I am. The Celestial Realm was too expansive. Even an Immortal Palace tier elite like the Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire had only traveled around in the territory of a few Celestial Kings, such small places that were only 1 or 2 stars, so it was actually very normal for him not to know where the Rock Palace was. Perhaps after I go to the Fu clan, I would be able to at least find out where the Rock Palace is, Ling Han mumbled. He returned to his accommodations, and couldn't help but spar with the Empress in the Black Tower. The result was that the Empress was forced to use all her ultimate moves to be capable of just barely blocking his offensive, and the problem here was Ling Han had not used any kind of celestial technique at all. This level of strength was really a little exaggerated. Another 2 days later, the team competition officially began. In the first round, Dark Moon City drew an empty lot, and in the second round, they drew a weak team which had ranked below 200 in the last competition. Still, what did it matter if it was a strong team or a weak one? They progressed triumphantly all the way, and no team was a match of theirs. The difference lay in how long Ling Han wanted the opposing team to last. After the qualifying rounds ended, the finals began, and 32 teams drew lots once more. The first opponent of Dark Moon City was the champion team from the last competition, the Double Extreme Cities team, which was led by Yuan Xingping. Everyone was discussing spiritedly, saying that Dark Moon City's journey as a dark horse would end thus. The present Yuan Xingping's strength would definitely be stronger than in the last competition now that he had settled for a few hundred years. But the matter developed in a way that made all their jaws drop. When the two teams confronted each other, Yuan Xingping actually forfeited. Ling Han, I am indeed no match for you at present, but the breach from the Genesis tier to severing mundane tier is too wide. Even if there is a very big difference between us now, this gap would endlessly shrink after advancing into the severing mundane tier. By then I will battle you. Though Yuan Xingping forfeited, he had not lost his fighting spirit. On the contrary, his fighting spirit blazed like fire. Ling Han laughed loudly. This was the kind of competitive spirit that he liked. Even if a battle in the future was inevitable, his heart would still be filled with respect. He nodded and said, "Then I will wait expectantly for that. You had best hurry. I have no wish to wait for 10 million years to be able to challenge you. Yuan Xingping waved a hand and led his team off. If Ling Han missed the opening of the severing mundane pool this time, then the next time would be 10 million years later. Though there were still other places that he could sever his mortal bonds, he believed that a prodigy like Ling Han would definitely choose the severing mundane pool, even if he had to wait another 10 million years for it. Ling Han involuntarily stroked his chin. Why did everyone think that he would not be able to make it in time for the opening of the severing mundane pool? The defending champion had been eliminated just like that, causing a commotion to rise up among the masses. Was this cheating? But none of the higher-ups of the Black Moon sect naturally shared this thought. They were among those who knew that Ling Han had managed to fight Changsun Liang to a tie. If this kind of strength was still incapable of sweeping aside all his opponents, what justice would there be left in this world? If Ling Han was weak, it would mean that Changsun Liang was weak too. In the top 16, top 8, and top 4 there was not a single team that could match Dark Moon City. Those like Bianzhe, who had participated in the Great Banquet on Celestial Clouds Island, and had met Ling Han before, automatically admitted defeat. There was no need to even commence the battle. This caused Mao Shuyu and the others to feel rather confused. In the qualifiers, they had still had a tough time in the competition, but why had it become smooth sailing now that they were in the finals? This was really bizarre. Yet they were increasingly excited because they only had to win one more battle, and they would become the champion. Champion! The last time they became champions was 3 eras ago, and the Dark Moon team that was led by Mao Dai was similarly invincible and unmatched. But at that time, Mao Dai had at least encountered a few that could match him, which was unlike this time, where all the strong teams surrendered without even a battle. Those who had made a wager could no longer sit still. Those people were clearly cheating here. They raised an objection to the gamble house, and because there really were too many people, it even alerted the higher-ups of the Black Moon sect, and only then did news of that battle on Celestial Clouds Island spread out, and only with that was the dissatisfaction of the masses appeased. So as it turned out, Ling Han was actually so powerful. The opponent of the final battle for Ling Han and his team was Blue Flame City, where Dan Yujing was. This woman was indeed strong. Without Yuan Xingping blocking her way, the team she led had advanced through the competition like a hot knife through butter, charging all the way into the finals. Unfortunately, her next opponent was so strong that they could render anyone hopeless. When the finals were here, a great many people came. The Holy Sun, Changsun Liang, also arrived in person. It was possible that he would personally bestow on Ling Han and his team the prize for the champion. It was not all that generous, just a few star stones. What mattered was the prestige. There were not many people who would not be proud of becoming the champion. To the forces under the rule of the Black Moon sect, Black Moon City was a holy land. That feeling of achievement and honor of being able to win the first place in this place could not be described. The match began, and Dan Yujing stubbornly did not choose to forfeit, but rather to battle with her full prowess. Under her leadership, the team of 10 from Blue Flame City unleashed a gorgeous offensive. But against Ling Han, it was not of much use, as he easily suppressed it without much difficulty. This final round was possibly the battle that had the widest gap in power between the two sides in history. In merely the time for a few breaths, the battle had concluded. And as expected, Changsun Liang stood up. He was going to bestow the prize on the winning team in person. Humph! A figure suddenly shot out, his whole body completely enshrouded in regulations and entwined by great Tao. Sect Master! A great many powerful figures exclaimed in shock, and all those in severing mundane tier knelt. This was the sect master of Black Moon sect, a heaven soul elite. Yet the sect master of the Black Moon sect did not look like he had any intention of paying them any regard at all. He raised his head and looked at the skies, his expression solemn. Everyone couldn't help but raise their heads and look at the skies as well. Right until at least an hour's time had passed, a massive starship appeared in the skies, casting a giant shadow on the ground. At the helm, a flag with 7 stars was raised. 100 Magnificent City! Someone immediately gasped. 100 Magnificent City, a 2-star city, was similarly under the rule of the Fu clan. However, the territories of Black Moon City and 100 Magnificent City just happened to border on each other. Thus, it was inevitable that there would be some conflicts between the two forces, and they were considerably intense at that. 100 Magnificent City was grasped in the hands of the Shao clan. This was a clan-type force unlike the Black Moon sect. And now, the 100 Magnificent City had suddenly sent out such a starship here. Was this a sign that there would be a massive war coming? Xiao, two figures descended, and the one in the lead was an elder. He was similarly wrapped all over with the brilliance of great Tao, and he held a young man in his right hand. When they landed on the ground, he finally released the young man. The elder chuckled and said, "Brother Tai, what need is there to be so aggressive? Old Geezer Dong, what have you come for?" The sect master of the Black Moon sect asked coldly. "Oh, a boy that's not too bad emerged in our Shao clan, and has never met anyone that could match him. I heard that the holy son of your sect is not too weak, either, so I brought him here to ask for some guidance." The elder replied smilingly. His name was Shao Dong, a super powerhouse of the Shao Dong and a heaven soul elite. The young man beside him clasped his hands and said, "This junior is Shao Shang. Greetings, my lord." Though their visitor had ill intentions, the sect master of the Black Moon sect naturally wouldn't show his displeasure to a junior when his seniors were there. He nodded and said, "Young man, you want to challenge Changsun Liang? It is just a spar, so please allow it, my lord." Shao Shang continued, a smile appearing on his lips, bringing a slight hint of mockery. Changsun Liang had been renowned for many years, and it was assured that the Shao clan was unaware just how strong he was. But now they actually dared charge right to their doorstep, and it was definitely not to seek their own humiliation. But the problem here was that Changsun Liang was already a super genius that would not appear in millions and millions of years. Could Shao Shang be stronger than even him? Could not be imagined. Perhaps this Shao Shang is really very strong, but it is absolutely impossible that he could reach the heights of the Holy Sun. That's right. As long as he manages to endure a few moves from the Holy Sun, he would naturally become famous. How cunning! Actually planning to use this kind of method to quickly build up a reputation. Humph! Do they think that it is easy to last a few moves when fighting the Holy Sun? The best scenario is for the Holy Sun to defeat him with a single move, and let's see who would dare come again in future. Everyone was discussing spiritedly in soft whispers. Shao Dong was a heaven soul elite. Who would dare exclaim loudly in front of him? Oh! The sect master of the Black Moon sect showed a hint of a smirk. Clearly, he, too, thought that they only wanted to use Changsun Liang to increase their own fame. He turned to look at Changsun Liang and said, "Lianger, come and have a spar with this little friend, then." "Yes, sect master." Changsun Liang agreed respectfully, and then strode out. Shao Shang also took a few steps forwards, facing Changsun Liang directly. Circumstances do not look too good. Ling Han's expression was grim. He was not as optimistic as all the others. He could vaguely sense that this Shao Shang was extremely strong, and definitely in no way inferior to Changsun Liang. He couldn't really say why that was. It was just an instinctive feeling. If Changsun Liang was in his best condition, then there wouldn't be much of a problem. But the issue here was that Changsun Liang's spirit had been wounded, and he would not be able to use his full battle prowess. Then that would be dangerous. Yet the Empress did not take it to heart. The only person she cared about was Ling Han. Putting aside the fact that Changsun Liang would lose, even if he was beaten to death right in front of her, it would not move her in the slightest. However, since Ling Han cared, she, too, cast a few looks at Shao Shang, nodded and said, "This person is indeed not inferior to Changsun Liang, and with Changsun Liang's present state, there is no way he would be a match for him." She was not the type to beat around the bush with her words, speaking frankly whatever she thought. Ling Han frowned, but this battle was already inevitable, because this was not only a battle to show who was stronger between Changsun Liang and Shao Shang, but was also the clash between two great forces which might perhaps decide the standing of the two forces in future. Because these two people would become leading figures in their respective forces. Whoever lost the battle, it would lead to a lasting influence on their own force. The great battle could happen at any moment. Changsun Liang calmly stated, I have cultivated a few more years than you have, so I will let you have the first 3 moves. Then I'll thank you for that. Xianxia bared his teeth in a grin, showing a faint hint of mockery. You can act proud only at this moment. After I defeat you, you will only be able to weep. Transmigration stood, his arms crossed behind his back. He had absolute confidence in himself. After all, there were not many prodigies that were the likes of Linghan and the Empress. Even if there were, they should not appear in large numbers in a 2-star force either. Xianxia did not rush to attack. Instead, he stared fixedly at Transmigration as he released his aura. He was really very strong. A red-colored aura surged out from within his body, turning into something akin to an ocean with patterns of great Tao rippling within. And this was still just aura. It was practically a sea of regulations. A sea of fire. Transmigration's expression immediately became serious. This was a strong enemy, and definitely could not be underestimated. He was definitely not inferior to Linghan. He, too, channeled his origin power to the fullest, his whole person suddenly seeming like a sharp sword that had just been unsheathed, exuding a forceful, cold sharpness that was breathtaking. Piercing wind. Xianxia flicked a finger, and a powerful gale suddenly whipped out towards Transmigration. Transmigration stretched out a hand and pressed down, meeting the incoming attack. Pong! He had sealed off this strong gale, but it immediately exploded in his palm, turning into surging flames. Creak! Transmigration was sent backwards 3 steps by this blow. The blood was dripping from the palm of his hand, and his expression was grim. Hiss! Everyone erupted in uproar. In this exchange, Transmigration actually was at a small disadvantage. They had initially thought that Xianxia wanted to use Transmigration to make himself famous. And this was indeed true. Xianxia definitely was using Transmigration as a stepping stone. However, his ambition was much greater than that. He had not come to exchange a few blows with the latter, proving his own strength. Instead, he had come to defeat Transmigration. Defeating a young king tier that had been renowned for a long time would naturally grant him overnight success, and he would be able to replace Transmigration as the top in the Genesis tier. All of Transmigration's previous efforts would be equivalent to having been paving the way for him. He only needed to defeat Transmigration once, and he would be able to reap the fruits of all his prestige and honor. Brother Xianxia, as it turned out, your strength is actually so low. Xianxia pretended to be baffled. He shook his head. I'm really sorry about that. I thought you were very strong, so I used my full strength. I never thought that it would wound you. He put on a serious face and said, in the next move, I will definitely not try so hard. This was undisguised mockery. Transmigration did not get angry. The battle between 2 king tiers was naturally not decided through chit-chat, but through pure strength. His strength was not inferior to the other parties. However, he had firstly underestimated his opponent, and had not thought that Xianxia's offensive would be so frightening, and secondly, he was limited by his previous promise. Otherwise, after his opponent had delivered a powerful move, he could take advantage of the opening and counterattack, and it would definitely be able to cause some slight injury to Xianxia as well. 3 moves. This was the trap that Transmigration had laid out for himself. For a king tier like himself, the words that came out of his mouth were as good as gold. So how could he go back on his word? Xianxia again began building up power for a strong move. He did not feel the slightest shame in making use of this loophole. In any case, a victory was a victory, so what need was there to be concerned about the means that he had used to gain his win? A few breaths later, he finally made his move, and as his figure pounced out, fiery flames were entwined around his fist as he hurled a punch at Transmigration. As the punch flew out, the whole sky was filled with flames, as if a shower of flames was raining down on them. The sect master of the Black Moon sect stretched out a hand, and this shower of flames was suddenly limited to a specific area to prevent those outside the battle zone from being injured as well. Meanwhile, Xiaodong showed a hint of ridicule in his expression. His purpose here today was to crash their gathering. What Transmigration? A prodigy that could only appear once in millions and millions of years. Their Xiao clan also had one, and one that was more outstanding at that. Changsun Liang shouted, and set out a defensive shield around him. Limited by his promise, he had to let his opponent have the first 3 moves. Thus, he could only defend and dodge but could not take the offensive, which caused himself to be trapped in an absolutely disadvantageous situation. Xiao Sheng laughed loudly, his punch arriving. His fist had actually turned into a large mouth of roaring flames which bit towards Changsun Liang. Pong! Changsun Liang's figure streaked back from the flames, multiple cracks appearing in the shield around him, and then crumbling and collapsing with a bang. How could he possibly block the attack of a king tier that was his equal just by staying on the defensive? The best solution was to answer an attack with an attack of his own. Changsun Liang's expression was grim. Though he had blocked 2 blows, the situation was extremely unfavorable. His blood was surging in his body, and a mouthful of blood was close to being spat out of his mouth. He still had to take 1 more blow. "Brother Changsun, are you all right?" Xiao Sheng's expression was filled with concern, but his eyes were filled with sneering derision. He had done it on purpose. "If you're not happy about it, come here and beat me up. AI. Rumors are really deadly. So Brother Changsun is not all that strong, after all, and I had been expectant for nothing, mistakenly thinking that I could finally find a worthy opponent. I did not think that you would be so weak to be unable to withstand a few strikes from me." He continued to disparage Changsun Liang like mad. Changsun Liang was indifferent. His composure control was definitely well practiced. As long as the other's mouth was not poisonous to the extent that Ling Han had been, he would not take it to heart at all. If Ling Han had known his thoughts, should he feel pride, or would he be grimacing? "Skip the nonsense," Changsun Liang stated calmly. He turned his fury into fighting spirit. He only had to survive 1 more move, and he would definitely be able to launch an aggressive counterattack, making the other aware what the words Changsun Liang meant. A king tier that was invincible among his peers. How could that possibly have been a mere boast? Xiao Sheng scoffed and retorted, "Then take the 3rd move from me." He began building up power for another strong move again. This time, flames were surging out of his body, turning into a fiery beast. Then, the flames flickered, and a 2nd beast appeared. A 3rd, a 4th, a 5th. He seemed to have turned into a cave of flames, with innumerable flaming beasts appearing out of him. Each and every one of them was formed from patterns of great Tao that had taken the shape of flames. If one touched them, that would be equivalent to confronting the regulations of fire head-on. Stampede of 10,000 beasts. Xiao Sheng laughed loudly and pointed at Changsun Liang. "Go!" Boom! These beasts of fire suddenly charged towards Changsun Liang. They clearly were only manifestations of regulations, yet created a thunderous commotion as they stampeded, like there was an army charging out. Changsun Liang humphed and launched multiple punches at these beasts of fire. He did not dare directly confront these beasts of the regulations of fire with his bare fists, but had rather wrapped golden light around his fists, and it was similarly rippling with patterns of great Tao as if liquid gold. "Brother Changsun, could it be that you don't know that fire can overcome gold?" Xiao Sheng laughed from a distance. He did not follow with the offensive. Otherwise, it would be considered as a 4th move, and Changsun Liang would be able to launch an aggressive counter back at him. But if he did not move, then the 3rd move was not completed, and Changsun Liang would still be unable to counterattack. He too wanted to use this chance to settle his origin power. After all, releasing the stampede of 10,000 beasts was also quite exhaustive on him. It could be said that he had really used his advantage of 3 moves to its fullest. Changsun Liang continued to launch a barrage of blows as he frowned deeply. He naturally knew that fire could overcome gold, but as long as his strength surpassed his opponent completely, he could ignore this kind of natural trait. Of course, if it was like throwing a cup of water on a burning cart of firewood, then it would definitely be the water that would be instantly evaporated by the flames one. He was undoubtedly a king tier of the younger generation, and his strength could overwhelm all his opponents, so there naturally was no need to be concerned about elements that would overcome or strengthen one another. However, Xiao Sheng's strength was truly not inferior to his, and this caused him to be stuck in unfavorable circumstances. In Chinese philosophy of 5 elements, gold metal is countered by fire, while fire is countered by water, in simplified terms. As hinted in the next paragraph, there are also those that strengthen others, such as wood strengthening fire and so on. Look up Wuxia on Wiki for details. In a battle of elites, any minute factor could possibly influence the final outcome of their battle. Fire subdued gold, and in this kind of battle of king tiers, this was really too fatal. Boom! When the 10,000 beasts had all surged past, Changsun Liang had also been blasted back more than 90 meters, with a few charred spots on his clothes, though most of it was still undamaged. This was because he wore a treasured robe that possessed astonishing defenses. But it was not a pseudo-celestial tool, after all, so it could not possibly defend completely against the most powerful strike from a Genesis tier, and Changsun Liang still looked battered and exhausted. And this was because he was Changsun Liang. If it was another Genesis tier, then even if he was wearing 10 treasured robes, he would only be burnt into ash in an instant. Changsun Liang panted heavily, a sliver of blood at the corner of his lips. He could only defend and could not fight back, yet he still managed to take 3 powerful moves from an elite that was his equal head-on. Unless he had as freakish a physique as Ling Han had, it was absolutely impossible that he would be completely unwounded. His eyes became very harsh. Even in that battle of peak stage king tiers between Ling Han previously, he had never cut such a sorry figure. It was not because Xianxia was stronger than Ling Han, but rather because the former had shamelessly made use of his promise. This was a king tier, but more than that, he was also an ambitious and ruthless character. As long as he achieved his purpose, he would use all means, fair or foul. Pa Xiaosheng broke out in applause and smilingly said, "I have to admit that Brother Changsun does indeed have some strength. I initially thought that you would not be able to take 3 moves from me at all, but the truth has really given me a shock." Hearing these words, everyone in the area was furious. If the Lord Holy Sun had not promised to let you have the first 3 moves, how could he possibly have fallen into such a disadvantageous situation? But everyone could not help but admit that Xiaosheng was indeed very strong. Otherwise, even if Changsun Liang had allowed him the first 3 moves, the situation would not have become like this. However, Brother Changsun, you have sat long enough on the position of the top elite of the younger generation, so it's about time you gave someone else a turn. Xiaosheng laughed and struck out. He had already recovered to his prime condition, but Changsun Liang was injured, and he planned to use this opportunity to defeat the latter with a single move. The battle of the 2 young king tiers was also the competition of the 2 great forces of the Black Moon sect and the Shao clan. Whoever won this clash would gain a major advantage. Changsun Liang was naturally aware of this as well. He forcibly suppressed his injuries and began fighting with his opponent. At this moment, Changsun Liang's strength could clearly be seen. Even if he had been injured, his battle prowess was still incredibly violent, and he was clashing with Xiaosheng without showing any sign of weakness, showing that his reputation as a king tier had definitely not come casually. However, Ling Han frowned. Not good, this was extremely not good. Changsun Liang had initially suffered a spiritual wound, and now he had been blasted with 3 powerful moves successively, so his battle prowess should have dropped drastically. Yet his battle prowess had returned to its peak state at this moment. What was the reason for that? He had to have used some kind of secret technique to forcibly suppress his injuries. If Changsun Liang was unable to defeat Xiaosheng in a short time, then once the effects of the secret technique had passed, not only would he be forced back to where he started, his injuries would also in fact become heavier, and his condition would be even worse. How could he use such a secret technique without paying some kind of price? Ling Han could see this, so how could the powerful figures of the Black Moon sect not? They all showed expressions of anxiety. If Changsun Liang could show his impressive might and defeat Xiaosheng in a few moves, there naturally would not be any problem. But Xiaosheng was really too strong, completely not inferior to Changsun Liang at all. Even if the 2 of them had fought in their best condition, it would be hard to determine who would emerge victorious, and now to want to decide the battle in just a few moves. Even if Changsun Liang used a powerful method that meant throwing his life on the line, how could it be that his opponent would definitely take it head-on? This was terrible. Meanwhile, Xiao Dong was smiling slightly as he stroked his beard. He and their Xiao clan had waited too long for this day to come. Previously, the Black Moon sect had already produced a king tier, causing a few two-star forces around them to feel uneasy. Though they were all under the reign of the Fu clan had never made it a law that they had to maintain peaceful relations among themselves. In the celestial realm, battle was the main theme that would never change. Once Changsun Liang matured, putting aside the possibility of reaching the Immortal Palace tier, with his talent as a king tier, there should be no problem for him to defeat dividing soul tiers. By then, the Xiao clan would be in a dangerous position. Thankfully, they had also produced a Xiao Sheng. At present, Xiao Sheng was not 20,000 years old yet. After showing such strong natural talent, he had been nurtured by the Xiao clan in secret, right until he had reached the peak stage of the Genesis tier. Only then had he appeared in the public eye, and his first battle was against Changsun Liang. Xiao Sheng was a rookie, so there was no pressure on him. If he lost, it was completely normal, but if he won, he would be able to replace Changsun Liang and become the strongest prodigy of this current generation. The Xiao clan would be emerging aggressively as a powerful force. Xiao Dong laughed madly in his thoughts. What Black Moon sect? Tui. Changsun Liang pushed his battle prowess to its limits. But there would be a time when one's power was used up. He had been wounded in the first place, and suppressing his injuries forcefully to continue the battle was already his utmost. So how could he manage to further increase his battle prowess on this kind of basis? Impossible. The more he fought, the worse his situation became. He was already being suppressed by Xiao Sheng, and practically had lost all ability to counter. Finally, he spat out a mouthful of blood. That was the secret technique having exceeded its time limit, and he could no longer control his injuries. Pooh! Xiao Sheng threw out a punch, and a flaming blade burst out from his fist, stabbing deeply into Changsun Liang's right shoulder, and passing all the way through. This was a manifestation of regulations, being filled with destructive power, and immediately caused Changsun Liang to be in unbearable agony. The sect master of the Black Moon sect gripped his hands into tight fists. However, Xiao Dong had not done anything lethal, and Xiao Dong was right there beside him. So he forcibly suppressed his urge to make a move. The battle was already lost, and he could not afford to lose his pride at the same time. Ha 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 ha. This is the so-called top elite of the young generation? Xiao Sheng flicked up Changsun Liang with his fiery blade, his face filled with disdain. Don't make me laugh. He's not all that stronger than a piece of trash. From today onwards, I am the true top elite of the young generation, the only king tier. With a toss, Changsun Liang was thrown out. He smiled proudly, showing his wild nature, and was incredibly arrogant. Changsun Liang, when you see me in future, remember to take a different path. Otherwise, I will thrash you every single time I see you, and beat you into submission. He slanted a sideways look at the people around him, his expression filled with arrogance and as just simply asking for a beating. What is it? Not happy about it? Anyone who is dissatisfied can come in for a battle. As long as it is Genesis tier, as many of you can come. Everyone was extremely infuriated, but faced with this kind of elite, the advantage of numbers was meaningless. Furthermore, even if they had really defeated him with thousands or tens of thousands of them, what meaning would there be to it? It would only be a joke to others. Ling Han quickly stepped out, catching hold of Changsun Liang. He nodded and said, "Rest assured, just leave the rest to me." Changsun Liang grabbed hold of Ling Han's wrist and spat out a mouthful of blood first. Then, he said, "Be careful. That person's strength is definitely not inferior to mine." Ling Han broke into a grin and said, "Brother Xianxia, don't tell me that you have not discovered that I have broken through?" Fuck, he really had. Changsun Liang was instantly dumbfounded. Because Ling Han was too strong, others would subconsciously overlook his cultivation level. And now he suddenly realized that Ling Han had managed to fight him to a tie when he had only been a great saint. Then, now that this guy had advanced into Saint King tier, how strong would he now have become? He was definitely at a freakishly strong level. Everyone felt very repressed and furious. Though not everyone here was a disciple of the Black Moon sect, whether it was Dark Moon City or Double Extreme City, they were all under the administration of Black Moon City. If the Black Moon sect was insulted, how could they possibly feel proud? Furthermore, Xianxia was indeed too despicable. Firstly, he had not won in an honorable manner, but had rather made use of the limit of 3 moves that Changsun Liang had promised. Secondly, Changsun Liang had been injured in the first place, so how could defeating a king tier that was not in his best condition count? Anyone could step out and give this arrogant guy a beating, but even Changsun Liang could only fight Xianxia to a tie in his prime condition. So was there anyone else that could give him a harsh thrashing? Ha 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 ha, brother Tai. Looks like this holy son of your sect has not cultivated enough. Xiao Dong laughed loudly, adding fuel to the fire without the slightest mercy. He broke into a cold smirk. That last blow that Xianxia had followed up with was really too brilliant, having directly wounded Changsun Liang severely. With that, it was highly possible that he would have to recuperate his injuries for 2 to 3 years, and would definitely miss the opening of the Severing Mundane Pool. For a prodigy like him, he would definitely choose to advance into celestial level at the Severing Mundane Pool, and once he missed that opportunity, that would mean waiting another 10 million years. Which also meant that Xianxia could gain a lead of 10 million years over him. Even in the celestial realm, this was also a very long time, enough for Xianxia to become an elite in the consummate level of dividing soul tier first, and raise the Black Moon sect to the ground. The sect master of the Black Moon sect wore a livid expression. However, because his whole body was entwined with regulations, no one could see his current expression clearly. Since no one from your sect is going to fight, I will take my leave first. Xiao Dong beckoned Xianxia over. Now that they had finished their display of superior might, it was time for them to leave. Wait! Just at this moment, a soft exclamation rang out. A young man slowly and casually walked out, his face bearing a faint smile. I will take up the challenge. It was Ling Han. Looking at the stage, everyone showed an expression of excitement. Previously, they had already heard that Ling Han had battled with Changsun Liang before, and their battle had ended in a stalemate. Furthermore, the fact that Changsun Liang had been injured was also because of his previous spar with Ling Han. They had never thought that things would be so coincidental, and they would encounter another super genius today. However, since Ling Han had shared the limelight in the previous battle with Changsun Liang, then with Changsun Liang having sustained injury, Ling Han should not be exempted, either. This battle was still very dangerous. You? Xianxia cast a look at Ling Han, and showed a hint of disdain in his expression. Who do you think you are? Are you even worthy of challenging me? He had defeated Changsun Liang, and had already become the new ruler of the young generation. How could any random person just challenge him? If any random person could challenge him as they liked, then wouldn't he die of exhaustion? Ling Han did not get angry. In any case, he just had to beat him as hard as he could later. He smiled and said, Previously, wasn't it you who said that anyone who is dissatisfied can challenge you, and there is no limit on numbers, either? Oh, aside from you, who else is dissatisfied? Xiaosheng asked coldly. Ling Han turned around and asked the Empress, Wife, are you satisfied? Dissatisfied? The Empress spoke up, her tone filled with assertiveness. Even if it was not to give face to Ling Han, the Empress would also feel dissatisfied. She was prouder than anyone else. You see, the two of us are dissatisfied, so how about we beat you up together? Ling Han was all smiles, as if he was saying something like let's have a meal together today, appearing to be very casual. A fury immediately surged up in Xiaosheng. Why was this guy so detestable? It was only a few words, and he was already infuriated to the extreme. He swept an eye over the Empress, and this rage rapidly disappeared into thin air. Such elegant bearing. How captivating. He immediately decided. Even if he had to snatch, he would have to bring this woman back to 100 Magnificent City. With such thoughts, he said, All right, then the two of you can fight me together. Ling Han snickered, and slowly circled around to stand behind Xiaosheng. In this way, he, Xiaosheng, and the Empress would be the 3 points of a triangle. He laughed and said, Wife, Let's kick this guy around like a ball. All right. The Empress nodded. Though her philosophy was much simpler, preferring directly killing whoever made her unhappy. Since Ling Han wanted to play around, she would also be happy to oblige him. Xiao Shang's expression involuntarily became very ugly. Just how far did the two of them look down on him? Actually wanting to trap him in between the two of them and kick him around like a ball? Was this combining their forces against him? Absolutely not. It was just you kicking it over and I kick it back. There was practically no difference from a one-on-one duel. For those that had reached heights like they had, they actually did not fear having to fight a few battles in succession. Their origin power was like an ocean, and their vitality was vibrant, so even if they had to fight for a few decades, they would not feel exhaustion. What a despicable mouth. Let's see if I won't rip it apart. He flew into a thunderous rage, and immediately leaped out, charging out towards Ling Han. Wife, catch the ball. Seeing that Xiao Shang had reached him, Ling Han threw out a punch. Pung, without a doubt, Xiao Shang was sent flying by his fist. With Ling Han's present strength, even if the Empress and Changsun Liang joined forces, they were no match for him, so what was merely Xiao Shang worth all by himself? The sect master of the Black Moon sect. Xiao Dong. Changsun Liang. All the spectators. Fuck. This. Had their eyes blurred? Xiao Shang was actually sent flying with such a casual punch. It could be confirmed that this blow from Ling Han had definitely not made use of any kind of celestial technique. There were no patterns of great Tao, and there was no light of regulations. If this was a celestial technique, then it was definitely one that had never been seen before. It was just a very simple, ordinary punch, and Xiao Shang had flown off just like that. Who could have imagined this? Who would believe it? Had Changsun Liang really fought him to a tie? Hiss. Could it be that it was not Xiao Shang that was strong, but rather Changsun Liang's injuries were too severe, and Xiao Shang had taken advantage of his weakness today? Otherwise, it would mean that Ling Han had not used his full strength at that time at all. Those who were the most in disbelief were the people from Dark Moon City. They knew that Ling Han was very strong, but it was only just now that they had found out that Ling Han actually managed to battle Changsun Liang to a tie. But looking at Ling Han's show of power now, they were directly dumbfounded. Was this really human? Xiao Shang streaked through the air, flying directly at the Empress. Though Xiao Shang had been dazed by that punch, a king tier was still a king tier after all. Seeing how a person had suddenly appeared in front of him, he immediately threw out a punch first, wanting to take the initiative. The Empress moved, and her slender, fair hand was a beautiful sight to behold. But the power of her palm strike was incredibly deep and resounding. As she delivered a palm strike, endless patterns of great Tao were compressed, practically enough to scare anyone to death. Pung 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 pung. Xiao Shang and the Empress engaged in a fierce exchange, and his strength was visible from this as well. He actually managed to block more than 30 moves from the Empress, and only then was he sent flying with a palm strike from the Empress, crashing back towards Ling Han again. You guys are really treating me like a ball. Xiao Shang was furious. With a loud shout, taking advantage of the fact that he was still in mid-air, he used the Blade of Flame. This was one of his strongest attacks. If one was slashed once by the flaming blade, he would suffer a Tao injury, and it was extremely fatal. Ling Han smiled, and stretched out his hand to grab the flaming blade. At first, Xiao Shang had wanted to stab him with the fiery blade, but when he saw that Ling Han had stretched out a hand to grab at his blade, he naturally would not dodge, either. Thus, Ling Han's hand steadily and firmly grabbed the fiery blade. Not good. Changsun Liang involuntarily paled. It was because he had taken a strike from this fiery blade of Xiao Shang at the end, causing shards of the regulations of fire to fill his entire body, and merge into one inside his body. They were very difficult to expel. Having sustained such injuries, even if a severing mundane tier or dividing soul tier elite stepped out, it would be very hard to deal with it because this had already fused with his body, and if things were done forcefully, it would cause frightening damage to the physical body. Ling Han's using his bare hand to grab the fiery blade would merely be seeking his own suffering. You can't underestimate Xianxia just because your first strike succeeded. This man was a genuine king tier, with indomitable strength. Pooh! Changsun Liang was still thinking when he saw that after Ling Han had grabbed the flaming blade, he immediately sent out a flying kick that landed on Xiaoxiang's chest. Pung! This guy was again sent flying and crashed back towards the Empress. To this, Changsun Liang gaped, extremely speechless. He had seen clearly. Ling Han's hand was completely unscathed, and not even a single small charred spot was to be seen. Fuck! This is too freakish. Strange, his action was clearly not very fast, and I could distinctly see him move, but why was Xiaoxiang caught off guard like that? Putting aside any sort of defense, he couldn't even manage to stretch out his arm to block the blow. That's right. Even if it had been me, I wouldn't have been like that. He must have been scared off by Ling Han's aura as a king tier and lost all power of resistance. And that must be the case. Everyone could not understand what they had seen and thought that they had found a logical explanation. However, those elites above the severing mundane tier had a different opinion. A seemingly light touch is actually heavy. A seemingly slow action is actually quick. These powerful figures all bore stunned expressions, their hearts throbbing wildly at Ling Han's strength. Though every single move that Ling Han made could be seen incredibly clearly, as if anyone could easily block him, it was another issue whether they actually could manage to do so. However, in truth, unless Xiaoxiang's reaction speed and speed of attack could speed up another 10 times, it would be completely impossible for him to block Ling Han's blows. Ling Han's movement was too fast, as if it was lightning. One could see how a lightning bolt descended incredibly clearly, but if you had seen lightning and still wanted to stretch out your hand to block it, how could that possibly be done? But practically no one could attain such a level. Not even any of these powerful figures could do so. If they made a move now, they would definitely be even faster than Ling Han, but in terms of a battle of equals, being able to force their opponent to watch helplessly, unable to even stretch out a hand in an attempt at defense, was merely something delusional. It had to be known that Xiaoxiang was already a true king tier, and only an equal could match his battle prowess in this world. How could anyone possibly overwhelm him? This young man was going to defy the heavens. Pung 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 pung. After being sent flying over to the Empress's side, Xiaoxiang would be able to counter at least, and was only defeated after exchanging a few dozen moves with the Empress. He was again sent flying. Yet when he had reached Ling Han's side, he really could only suffer being beaten. Whether Ling Han was punching him with a fist, striking him with a palm, or kicking him with a foot, he would be sent flying with a single strike. The gap in their power was clear with one look. Everyone could feel their hair stand on ends. Changsun Liang and Xiaoxiang were already prodigies of the highest grade, but now another two had actually appeared, and they were completely superior to Xiaoxiang. 2. Hiss, my gods! The sect master of the Black Moon sect broke into a smile. Though Changsun Liang had indeed been injured heavily, Xiaoxiang presently was even worse off now. He was hit back and forth like a ball, sustaining both injury and humiliation. Xiao Dong's expression had naturally changed completely. His eyes were shooting fire. He had never thought that the situation would take such a sudden turn like this. Xiaoxiang had actually been defeated, and it was not a narrow loss but a complete defeat, being defeated by two people at the same time. How could it be so? He couldn't help but want to interfere. 3 such young king tiers had actually appeared in the Black Moon sect. If they were given a few billion years' time, who would be able to match them among 2-star forces? Ho ho, old man Dong, what are you planning on doing? The sect master of the Black Moon sect said, all smiles, though he had sealed off any possible attempt for Xiao Dong to make a move. If the latter made any sort of move, then the attack would only be directed at him. The two of them had exchanged blows many times, so the sect master of the Black Moon sect naturally had no fear of him. Xiao Dong looked coldly at the sect master of the Black Moon sect and suppressed his urge to make a move. Since Xiao Dong had not admitted defeat, it would not be appropriate for him to call a halt to the battle either. But was this really a battle? Perhaps the exchange between the Empress and Xiaoxiang could still be considered a battle, but the exchange between Ling Han and Xiaoxiang was definitely not one. That could only be called a one-sided beating. By now, Xiaoshang didn't know how many punches and kicks he had endured from Ling Han, his whole figure dejected and depressed. "I don't want to play anymore," the Empress said to Ling Han. Her patience had never been the best, and she would usually eliminate directly whomever she disliked. Ling Han nodded. His wife was tired, so they should stop playing. He stretched out a hand and grabbed Xiaoshang. With a smile, he said, "Young man, you have to learn humility in future. See, I am so strong, yet I am not proud or arrogant. So what are you worth?" These words rendered everyone speechless. The two of you had been kicking him around like a ball, so how much prouder could you be? But when they recalled how arrogant Xiaoshang had previously been, everyone felt that their anger had been vented. This kind of character needed to be taught a good lesson. This felt incredible. With a casual toss, Xiaoshang created a slight groove on the ground, sliding until he finally stopped at the side of Xiao Dong's feet. This was practically a provocation. Ling Han actually did not want to casually become enemies with a dividing soul tier elite, but with him having thrashed Xiaoshang publicly and in such a humiliating manner like this, the feud between him and the Xiao clan was confirmed, so what need was there for him to be reserved any longer? Xiao Dong picked Xiaoshang up, though he wanted nothing more than to slap the latter. They had anticipated great results for tens of thousands of years, and had just barely enjoyed the taste of victory when they were forced back where they had started. But no matter what, Xiaoshang was still the most outstanding descendant of the Xiao clan, and had boundless prospects. Furthermore, this was not entirely Xiaoshang's fault, either, but rather that Ling Han and his wife were too overwhelmingly strong. "Young man, what is your name?" Xiao Dong spoke up, his tone very even. For a character like him who had lived for who knew how many millions and millions of years, he naturally knew very well to restrain his killing intent. Ling Han smiled slightly and answered, "My surname is Ding, and my given name is Xiaochen." "Who?" Ding Xiaochen had just been watching with envy from the sidelines, and when he heard these words, he almost spluttered out a mouthful of blood. "You can't fucking screw me over like this." Indeed, he very much wanted to become well-known, and become the strongest in the younger generation, but did not want to do so via such a means. Why did he feel that this method was a little familiar and a little bit like a trap? In the past, the Han clan had charged to their doorstep and said that someone from their Ding clan had been insolent, destroying the physical body of a prodigy from their Han clan. But the Ding clan had forbade any of their clansmen from entering into the ancient realm after Ding Zizhen's incident. Moreover, the Ding clan did not have the ability to send a Genesis tier into the ancient realm. This would require at least a dividing soul tier elite. Could it be that that matter was connected to Ling Han? Impossible, impossible. Ding Xiaochen immediately shook his head. He must have thought too much. He hurriedly called out, Senior, this junior is the real Ding Xiaochen. That person is named Ling Han, so please don't fall into his trap and be deceived, Senior." He had no wish to become the target of a dividing soul tier elite. That would really be grumbling that he wasn't dying fast enough. Hearing these words, everyone couldn't help but show expressions of disdain. It was presently the battle between the Black Moon sect and the Xiao clan, so how could you weaken the morale of your own side? And calling out Senior in such a boot-licking way at that, too. But to Ding Xiaochen, this was also the attitude that he should take. Otherwise, was he supposed to call out old geezer or old fart? Only now did Xiao Dong realize that he had been tricked by Ling Han, and his face involuntarily darkened. He did not even know how he was supposed to describe Ling Han. The latter had deliberately misreported his identity, obviously not wanting to become a target of the Xiao clan. This was a display of weakness. But just how outrageously brazen was he to publicly deceive a dividing soul tier elite? Humph! You actually dare to trick me? He glared at Ling Han. Instantly, two iron swords leaped out of his eyes, slashing out towards Ling Han at an incredibly fast speed. This was the overwhelming advantage of two major tiers. What more when the gap between celestial level and immortal level was as wide as the gap between heaven and earth? How was Ling Han supposed to block this? The sect master of the Black Moon sect moved. He had long since been prepared. Stretching out a hand, he crushed these two iron swords. He laughed and said, Old geezer Dong, you are really getting more childish the more you age. to actually fall down to the level of a junior. You can't allow juniors their mischief and to play around. Xiao Dong's expression was extremely ugly. He stared coldly at the sect master of the Black Moon sect. But this was the territory of another. He had already moved once, and if he made another move, the sect master of the Black Moon sect would probably fly into a rage. He had no wish to spark a full war between the Xiao clan and the Black Moon sect either, and thus said, "Fine. Then we'll have these juniors battle once more in the severing mundane pool." After one had advanced into celestial level, no matter how wide their gap had been in the Genesis tier, it would shrink endlessly because the breach from immortal level to celestial level was really too huge. Furthermore, there was also variation in quality in the severing mundane tier. The more thoroughly one severed his mortal bonds, the stronger his strength would be after taking this crucial step. There was no need to be too bothered about the gain or loss of a Genesis tier. The true start of an elite was after they had advanced into the severing mundane tier. Holding Xiaoshang, he leaped up and already soared back to that vessel in the skies. Then, the ship turned around and left, returning to 100 Magnificent City. Immediately, the whole area broke out in fiery cheers, all cheering for Ling Han and the Empress. They had won. Ling Han, Ling Han, Ling Han, Luan Xing, Luan Xing, Luan Xing. Their cries rang out, as if they would shake down even the stars in the skies. Ling Han smiled and clasped his hands in the direction of those around him. Meanwhile, the Empress was incredibly proud. She didn't bother to pay anyone any regard. "Brother Ling, you are really extraordinarily strong." After Changsun Liang had undergone emergency treatment, he was now mobile. However, his injuries had become worse, and the shards of fire regulations had also invaded his body, so he would need a very, very long time to recover to his prime condition. Even if he had the help of saintly medicine, it was still difficult. However, he was the holy son of the Black Moon sect. The severing mundane pool would open in another year or so, and the great elites of the sect would probably treat him at all costs. They definitely could not allow him to miss an opportunity like this, or that would mean waiting for another 10 million years. Ling Han laughed loudly and said, "Thankfully, I have not disappointed you. You have done far more than not disappointing me. You are practically astounding." Changsun Liang shook his head. "Now, even I feel my fighting spirit blaze, and highly anticipate the battle I will have with you after we enter into severing mundane tier. Otherwise, I will definitely not fight with you again." Just look at how Xiaoshang was being hit around like a ball. It was fine to watch such a spectacle, but he had no desire to experience it personally. Ling Han smiled faintly. If he successfully entered into the severing mundane tier, that would be delivering a strike to the heaven and earth, which was much stronger than striking himself. Even now, Changsun Liang was no match for him. If he did not advance into celestial level via the strongest method when he entered into the severing mundane tier, then it was even more impossible that he could be a match for him. The competition ended, and Ling Han was busy collecting his winnings. Both he and the Empress had placed a wager of a total of over 1,000 star stones. Those were their full wealth, and now it had become 20,000, which could be considered an exorbitant sum. When the two of them returned to the relay station, they saw that their accommodations had completely become a sea of people. These people were all waiting for Ling Han and the Empress. Their display was too outstanding, so a great many forces wanted to recruit them. There were also a considerable number of people that wanted to befriend them. If they did not move now, the two of them would no longer be in their league. Ling Han was pestered beyond tolerance, and in the end he could only ask Celestial Clouds Island for help. With the red-haired young man as their escort, they went to the Celestial Clouds Island, and only then did they manage to gain a moment of peace. Only a day had passed, and Changsun Liang's condition had improved considerably. According to him, for heaven's soul elites of the sect had personally moved, not hesitating to even expend their own vitality in order to heal his injuries, and he had improved only with that. Going by the look of things, he would be able to recover fully in about half a year's time. Changsun Liang also extended an olive branch to Ling Han and the Empress, wanting to recruit them into the Black Moon sect. Though there was only one holy son, He could bestow the title of honored elders on them, and they would enjoy very good privileges. They were also the only ones who could become elders without having to break through to the severing mundane tier first. Ling Han refused tactfully. He had no wish to stay for a long time here. He only had to find out the exact whereabouts of the Rock Palace, and he would immediately set out. His wife, son, and parents were all waiting for him, so what time did he have to squander here? Changsun Liang did not force them. Ling Han and the Empress were too outstanding. Perhaps their future level was also higher than he could imagine. Ling Han and Changsun Liang made a promise to meet once more in another year and a half's time at the Severing Mundane Pool. And then the former returned to Dark Moon City with Long Gaofei. They spent another 2 months' time on the journey, and when they returned to Dark Moon City, they also brought back the news that they had won the first place in the martial arts competition. The whole city was in uproar. The last time Dark Moon City became champion was 3 eras ago. This position of champion naturally excited innumerable people. Everyone suddenly experienced a feeling of pride, and their cohesiveness increased greatly. Their sense of belonging to Dark Moon City also increased another level. The Duan clan and Long clan both energetically attempted to recruit Ling Han and the Empress. If they could obtain these 2 people, then it would not be an issue for their clan to soar. Furthermore, the Empress was clearly an integral whole with Ling Han. As long as Ling Han nodded, that would be equivalent to also gaining the alliance of the Empress. The best method naturally was an alliance through matrimony, yet Ling Han looked like he was not attracted by any feminine charms, causing both the Duan clan and Long clan to be at their wits' end. They had already sent out the most beautiful daughters of their clan, but they were not able to even enter the doors of Ling Han's residence. What mood did Ling Han have at present for flirting? He was presently studying the information about the Severing Mundane Pool. A year and a half later, he would enter into this place, and he would also be facing a competition of millions and millions of people by then. Severing one's mortal bonds had to be done in specific locations of the celestial realm, and this kind of location was usually incredibly dangerous. Thus, it was necessary to first understand the situation, or what would be severed would be his own life. In this place, even severing mundane tier ancestors could be killed, what more people like them who had yet to enter into celestial level. This danger was mainly reflected in the environment and the demonic beasts in the mystery realm. For example, there were caves that had strong absorption. If one was to be sucked in, it was never heard that they could actually come back out alive. Especially so for the Severing Mundane Pool. The power of heaven and earth there was the strongest, and was also the most dangerous. Every time, at least half the people who had entered into the Severing Mundane Pool had been killed in the mystery realm. Slightly less than half would be dying in the process of severing their mortal bonds afterwards, and the remaining few would just barely survive the ordeal and become severing mundane ancestors. This number would not exceed 100 every single time. Compared to the million that had entered, this ratio was pitifully low. And it was right at this moment that the Han clan came. The Han clan, a 3-star force and the overlord of 9 underworld city. In the past, the Han clan had once sent out a very outstanding junior for a training trip in the ancient realm. Firstly, if he could cultivate to the consummate level of the Genesis tier in the ancient realm, his battle prowess would far exceed his peers, and secondly, the ancient realm had treasures that were left behind by the celestial kings, so if he managed to get hold of these treasures, that would be fantastic. This junior was Han Chi. However, Han Chi encountered Ling Han, and for the sake of a void flower, the 2 of them battled. In the end, Ling Han destroyed Han Chi's physical body. If it were not for the fact that there was a technique that an elite of his clan had planted in his mind, protecting his spirit as it returned to the celestial realm, he would probably have died in shame in the ancient realm. At that time, Ling Han claimed that he came from the Ding clan of Dark Moon City, and thus the Ding clan was out of luck. This was not just the matter of a junior having his physical body destroyed. The Han clan also suspected that Ling Han had obtained the celestial technique of Celestial King tier. Thus, a powerful figure soon came to the Ding clan, but no matter how hard he investigated, he did not discover any possibility for a member of the Ding clan to travel to the ancient realm. To send some beneath celestial level into the ancient realm would at least require strength on the level of dividing soul tier. Who would be capable of doing this in Dark Moon City? Thus, the Han clan flew into a rage and then returned. On this matter, the Black Moon sect did not dare make any noise. The reason was very simple. How could a 2-star force challenge a 3-star force? Furthermore, there was no movement from the Fu clan, either. Should they begin a war with the Han clan just for the mere sake of a puny Ding clan? That would be a real joke. Furthermore, the Han clan had indeed experienced a loss in this matter. So no matter what, they should be allowed to vent their anger, right? All in all the members of the Ding clan were depressed. This time, another person had come from the Han clan, and it was the victim, Han Chi. He wanted to personally identify that criminal. When Ling Han heard this, he involuntarily propped up his chin and sank into deep thought. Could he use this chance to teach the Ding clan a lesson? Actually, Ling Han already planned to leave Dark Moon City. Firstly, it was already very close to the day that the Severing Mundane Pool would open, and around half a year would still have to be spent on the journey. Actually, the true waiting period would only be about a year. Secondly, he had made too big a show at Black Moon City. Though there were a great many forces that wanted to recruit him, there were definitely some other forces that wanted to eliminate him. Who would be willing to let a king tier emerge from another force? Wouldn't that be waiting to be conquered in future? Especially when he had also harshly offended the Shao clan. This was a 2-star force. For example, if they sent out a dividing soul tier elite, how was Ling Han supposed to block that? Even if the Ding clan, Long clan, and Duan clan joined forces, they would all be eliminated instantly even if they were only facing a Yin soul elite. Furthermore, it would already be a blessing if the Ding clan did not follow up with a subsequent strike of their own, and only watched the show from the sidelines. Of course, if Ling Han was willing to stay in Black Moon City, the Shao clan definitely would not dare invade. However, this was only a 1-star city, so what did the Shao clan have to fear? In any case, he was gonna leave, so why not play big this time round? Ling Han broke into a grin. Then let's play around. Present, he had no burdens at all. Feng Piyun and the others had all stayed behind in the secondary city of Black Moon City. They had all accustomed themselves to the regulations of the celestial realm. As long as they did not voluntarily confess, who would be able to tell that they had come from the ancient realm? The Rain Emperor had already left on his long journey as well, stepping on the path of his own Tao. There was nothing that he had to worry about. Ling Han began to make his preparations, and after about a day, he suddenly sent out the news that he requested to join the Ding clan. This caused a great commotion among the 3 great clans. Who would have imagined that, with both the Long clan and Duan clan having set out what could be considered sky-high conditions, Ling Han did not agree to join either clan. But the Ding clan did not make any attempt to recruit him, yet Ling Han would actually approach them on his own volition. What was going on here? Did this guy have a trait of a masochist? The Ding clan also began a serious discussion regarding this matter. I think that we should still accept this boy. Could it be that you people have not heard of his martial success? He is an equal of the Holy Sun, a 3rd Severance Grand Elder said. He was also one of the only 2/3 Severance Grand Elders of the Ding clan, and his name was Ding Shan. Furthermore, he is also good friends with the Holy Sun. If we can make a connection like this, then the Ding clan would definitely become the top noble clan in Dark Moon City in a single leap. The other 3rd Severance Grand Elder, Ding Song, shook his head, however, and said, "This damn brat is wily and cunning, and definitely bears no good intentions. Our Ding clan did not promise him any kind of benefits at all, so why does he want to join us?" This was something that everyone did not understand. Even if Ling Han wanted to join any force, it should not have been the Ding clan. Moreover, wasn't it better for him to join the Black Moon sect? He was good friends with Changsun Liang. I think that this boy's words are not to be trusted, Ding Hu said decisively. Though he had not seen Ling Han many times, the horrible impression that this boy had left on him was deeply imprinted. The members of the Ding clan were divided into 2 factions. Half of them agreed to have Ling Han join them. After all, this was a supreme king tier, and he also had a connection with the Holy Sun, but the other half determinedly objected, thinking that Ling Han had no reason at all to join them, and there had to be a conspiracy at the bottom of this matter. This was indeed a conspiracy. However, even if the Ding clan thought so hard that their heads exploded from the effort, they would not know where this conspiracy would come from. After all, the information that both sides had hold of was not equal. Finally, everyone turned to look at Ding Yaolong. He was the only fourth Severance Grand Elder of the clan, and was also their pillar of support. Ding Yaolong stretched out a finger to tap lightly on the armrest. After a long while, he finally said, "Let Ling Han join the clan." He paused and continued, "Whether or not he has some intention that cannot be revealed, once he enters into the Ding clan, everything would no longer be up to him to decide. Ancestor is brilliant, whether they agreed or not." Since Ding Yaolong had already said thus, everyone could only nod their heads in agreement. However, thinking deeper about it, it was true. Once Ling Han joined the Ding clan, whether he was to be beaten or killed would all be up to the decision of the Ding clan. How could it be that dealing with a member of their own clan would still require approval from the Duan clan and Long clan? Even the Black Moon sect could not interfere in the internal matters of the Ding clan. This brat might be hiding some form or conspiracy, but once he entered into the Ding clan, then he would experience such torture that he would wish for death. Ding Hu also broke into a sinister expression. He could no longer wait to strangle Ling Han to death with his own hands, and there was that woman with a perfect figure as well. After he killed Ling Han, she would become his plaything. Very soon, the news spread out. The Ding clan accepted Ling Han's request, and agreed to have him join the Ding clan. They even expressed that they would bestow their surname on Ling Han to show their high regard for him. "See, we are all completely treating you like a family member." This was also a trap laid out by the Ding clan. To cultivators, a surname was extremely important, representing one's roots. And now having you change your surname was equivalent to giving you a slap. But the crux of the matter now was that Ling Han's present strength was too low. Thus, this move of the Ding clan did indeed seem like it was a reward for Ling Han. When Ling Han was informed, he couldn't help but smile, and told the messenger to return with a message of his own, saying that as long as he could join the Ding clan, he would change his surname to Ding. He was not worried at all because it was absolutely impossible that he would join the Ding clan, so the matter of changing his surname naturally could not happen at all. "Ding clan, you people have never done any good deeds. This time, I will let you guys have some fun," Ling Han mumbled to himself, a smile curling up the corners of his lips. Anyone who was familiar with him would know that this guy had to have plans of screwing someone over. "Hey, little Han, why do you look like you're about to do something bad?" a voice suddenly said. Without turning around, Ling Han already knew that only one person could speak in such a contemptible tone. The large black dog. He smiled and said, "What? You've grown tired of playing around? Sigh, the people here are far too inhospitable to guests, and they're absolutely no fun to mess around with," the large black dog said with a sigh. He rested a paw on his chin, and his expression was one of exasperation. Ling Han could already imagine how many people had been screwed over by this detestable dog. "Oh, that's right. You were wearing such an evil smile just then. You're definitely up to no good. Hurry up and tell Grandpa Dog so I can also have some fun." There was a bright glimmer in the large black dog's eyes. He loved to screw people over. Ling Han's eyes darted around, and he said, "I've planned a spectacular show, and there just happens to be a position for you. Do you want it?" An alert expression instantly spread across the large black dog's face. He was the grandmaster of screwing people over, so he was naturally vigilant to getting screwed over as well. In fact, he always felt like others wanted to do evil toward him. "Brat, what do you want Grandpa Dog to do?" "I want you to bite someone and lead them to a certain place," Ling Han replied with a smile. "Woof!" The large black dog was infuriated, and he furiously lunged at Ling Han. "You can go and bite someone. Your entire family can go and bite someone." This detestable dog was clearly an evil being who always ran around biting people. Yet he always refused to acknowledge his own identity as such. How incredibly shameless! Ling Han continued to dodge the large black dog's attacks as he described his plan. Gradually, the large black dog couldn't help but slow down and stop. There was a bright glimmer in his eyes. "Grandpa Dog shall accept this job." The large black dog stood up on his hind legs like a human before patting his iron underwear and saying, "I'll pat my chest and guarantee that I definitely won't screw up." Ling Han's expression involuntarily darkened. "Is that your chest?" "Hee, it was a mistake. A mistake," the large black dog said with a chuckle. There was suspicion on Ling Han's face, and he said, "Little Black, you're not going to screw me over as well, are you?" The large black dog instantly looked as if he had been insulted. He opened his mouth and was just about to bite at Ling Han. Yet his expression suddenly transformed into a smile instead. "You guessed it. Grandpa Dog initially wanted you to fall into a fire pit and burn to death. This detestable dog. I'm kidding. With our relationship, how can I harm you?" The large black dog said with a serious expression. The large black dog had a history of misdeeds, so his words naturally couldn't be trusted. However, Ling Han believed that his plan was very much to the large black dog's tastes. Even if the large black dog wanted to screw him over, he would only do so after the plan had been successfully carried out. Otherwise, the spectacular show wouldn't be possible. The human and dog started to discuss the fine details of the plan. Both of them were so evil that they could even frighten themselves, and after some discussions, they refined the initial plan that was full of flaws into one that was almost flawless. "Little Han, you're so evil. Be careful of growing an ulcer on your head and dying early," the large black dog said in a solemn yet nonsensical manner. Ling Han laughed and said, "In terms of evil, I have yet to reach 1/10,000th of your level. Naturally, Grandpa Dog is the ancestor of all evil beings, so I'm also immune to all poisons." The large black dog didn't feel ashamed upon hearing Ling Han's words, but instead felt a sense of smugness. After the large black dog left, Ling Han entered the Black Tower with the Empress. The Ding clan was like a dragon lair and a tiger den, so Ling Han naturally wouldn't risk bringing the Empress over. Thus, like with the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden, he left the Empress in the Black Tower. Meanwhile, the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden was completely undistracted as she continued to cultivate every day. Not only did she have the inheritance of the 3 Phoenix Kings, but she was also cultivating in the celestial realm. Add to that the reincarnation tree, and it was only natural that her cultivation had already soared to the peak stage of the Genesis tier. However, advancing to the severing mundane tier was still far too difficult. At this moment, she had already exhausted the inheritance power from the 3 Phoenix Kings. Thus, she could only rely on her own abilities if she wanted to reach the severing mundane tier. However, even prodigies like Changsun Liang needed to cultivate for at least 10,000 years in order to advance to the severing mundane tier. Although the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden had the reincarnation tree to help her, her aptitude was far too inferior. In fact, it would already be an outstanding achievement if she could reach the barrier to the severing mundane tier within 10,000 years. However, she definitely couldn't slash heaven and earth. Otherwise, she wouldn't be able to withstand the backlash, and thus would only end up killing herself. In other words, she needed to slash her own mundane relationships. That being the case, it was extremely likely that she would slash her feelings toward Ling Han. The Great Tao was merciless, and if one wanted to comprehend the Great Tao, they naturally needed to be aloof and devoid of desires as well. However, Ling Han didn't want to lose a wife. As such, he desired to concoct some alchemical pill that could extend one's lifespan without them needing to reach the severing mundane tier. Anyhow, reaching the severing mundane tier was far too difficult, so it was very likely that the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden wouldn't be able to succeed. If she forcefully attempted to advance, she would only end up killing herself. Regarding this, the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden was also helpless. Even in the ancient realm, her talent could only be regarded as fairly good. The gulf between her and the top prodigies was far too huge. Ling Han dragged his 2 wives over to have a threesome. The Empress didn't mind this, but the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden was so embarrassed that she couldn't help but bite Ling Han afterward. She was easily embarrassed, and there were still many positions that they had yet to unlock. Right now, threesomes were still extremely difficult for her to accept. "Your husband is about to venture into danger today, so aren't you going to give me some encouragement?" Ling Han said with a hearty laugh. After dressing himself, He couldn't help but slap the Empress' shapely buttocks. Upon seeing them undulate, he almost gave a howl as he leaped toward her again. After making love for a long while, Ling Han finally exited the Black Tower. The Ding clan had said that they would open their ancestral shrine in 3 days and accept Ling Han into the Ding clan there. At the same time, they would also bestow upon him the surname of Ding. Judging from these actions, it was clear that the Ding clan genuinely valued Ling Han. They were especially opening their ancestral shrine for him. However, whether or not they would target Ling Han during this process was another matter entirely. That's their ancestral shrine, Ling Han said with a shake of his head and chuckled. It was clear that after he went in, the ancestral shrine of the Ding clan would definitely become non-existent. At that time, what kind of expressions would the members of the Ding clan wear? After finishing his disguise, Ling Han smiled and left the army encampment, heading toward the Ding clan. After returning victorious, Ling Han and the others with outstanding achievements had all received 3 years of leave. During this time, they would receive their pay as usual. Thus, Ling Han was extremely free right now, and he was able to go wherever he wanted. Ling Han finally arrived at the Ding clan after casually strolling around for 2 days. This was inevitable. After all, Dark Moon City was far too large. The Ding clan was bustling with activity today as the young King Tier Ling Han was about to join them. Many people came over to witness this ceremony. Moreover, even up until today, the Ding clan and the Long clan still refused to believe that Ling Han would truly join the Ding clan. After all, this didn't make sense. To say nothing of the Ding clan's lack of promises and benefits, even if they did give Ling Han enough benefits, their previous conflicts should have still pushed Ling Han toward the Duan clan or the Long clan. This was especially the case if they all promised the same benefits. Something was wrong. Not only the Ding clan, but everyone else also found this to be incredibly strange. If Ling Han truly wanted to join some force, wouldn't it be better to find one in Black Moon City? The ceiling was higher, the stage was larger, and resources were also more abundant. Ling Han has arrived! Someone shouted upon seeing the man in azure robes appear before the front gate. The protagonist of today had finally arrived. Moreover, regardless of what Ling Han was planning, they could only judge today's events after they were over. Once Ling Han joined the Ding clan, there would be no turning back. Ling Han! A noble and dignified voice suddenly said. Ling Han looked over, only to see Mao Dai striding toward him. Ling Han hurriedly bowed and said, "Greetings, Lord Mao." He was genuinely extremely thankful toward Mao Dai, as it was him who had taught him another method of severing the mundane. In Ling Han's eyes, this was a huge favor. However, Mao Dai was slightly displeased as he asked, "Are you truly going to join the Ding clan?" Mao Dai couldn't help but feel that this was a shame. After all, he felt like even he didn't have the right to become Ling Han's master. However, like a bright pearl entering darkness, Ling Han was actually going to join the Ding clan? Wasn't this an act of self-humiliation? Ling Han smiled and said, "I want to join the Ding clan, yet I still have to see whether the Ding clan is willing to accept me. What does this mean?" Mao Dai found this reply to be extremely strange. The Ding clan had already opened their ancestral shrine, and they were already about to carve Ling Han's name into their family tree. As such, how could this be fake? Moreover, once Ling Han was bestowed with the surname of Ding, he would officially become a member of the Ding clan. At that time, no one would have the ability to interfere, regardless of what the Ding clan did to Ling Han. They wouldn't be in a position to interfere. "Rest assured, Lord Mao, I'm extremely clear about what I'm doing," Ling Han said in reassurance. Mao Dai looked at Ling Han deeply before eventually nodding in reply. He decided that he would be an obedient spectator today. Severing mundane tier grand elders from the Duan clan and the Long clan also walked over and tried to persuade Ling Han for one final time. Otherwise, once the ceremony began, there would be no turning back. A junior from the Ding clan walked over with an expression of respect and said, "Young Master Han." Right now, Ling Han still had yet to officially join the Ding clan. Thus, even if they were unwilling to, they still had to act welcoming and respectful. Regarding how they would treat him later, that was unknown. Perhaps the Ding clan would forget about their old hostilities, or perhaps the Ding clan would immediately kill him. Anyhow, this would be a private matter for the Ding clan, and it would have nothing to do with anyone else. Ling Han remained silent as he nodded in acknowledgement. He had absolutely no good feelings toward the Ding clan, so he couldn't be bothered speaking any nonsense at all. The person who had greeted him was unfazed as he said, "It's almost time. Please follow me, young Master Han." He led Ling Han into the Ding clan. In just a short while he would enter the ancestral shrine. This was an extremely serious ceremony, so Ling Han would naturally need to make some preparations. There was already no time for abstaining from meat or alcohol, but he could at the very least still bathe and burn some incense. As for the other spectators and guests, the Ding clan naturally sent members of their clan to welcome and lead them into the ancestral shrine. Generally speaking, the addition of a measly Genesis tier cultivator into the Ding clan couldn't have caught the attention of severing mundane tier grand elders. However, Ling Han was far too outstanding. His battle against the Holy Son of the Black Moon sect had ended in a draw, and his battle afterward had more so astounded everyone. Thus, not only did grand elders from the Ding clan attend this ceremony, but even mighty figures from the Duan clan and the Long clan had come. Would you look, even Mao Dai had come, hadn't he? His status was extremely high, and he could be regarded as the #1 elite among those below the 4th severance. Ling Han followed the junior of the Ding clan into a courtyard. Here, he took a bath before entering the main room to offer some incense and cleanse his mind. An hour later, Ling Han changed into new clothes before opening the door and leaving. Unexpectedly, however, it was Ding Xiaoqun who was waiting for him outside. "Ling Han," Ding Xiaoqun said through gritted teeth. He looked like he wanted to swallow Ling Han alive, and he continued, "You might have tricked the others, but you can't trick me. You're definitely up to no good." Ling Han chuckled and said, "I initially thought you were pig-head, but who knew that you also have some imagination? You've calculated wrong this time," Ding Xiaoqun said coldly. "Once you enter the Ding clan, you'll become a member of our clan when you're alive, and a ghost of our clan when you're dead. If the clan wants you alive, then you'll live. If the clan wants you dead, then you can only die. Are you trying to frighten me?" Ling Han asked with a smile. "Your fate was already sealed the moment that you stepped into the Ding clan," Ding Xiaoqun said with a humph. "Right now, there's already no turning back." However, Ling Han remained calm as he said, No. Please don't misunderstand. I still haven't joined the Ding clan yet. Moreover, in a while, I'm afraid that the Ding clan might not agree to accept me. You're nothing but a measly Genesis tier cultivator. So what trouble can you cause?" Ding Xiaoqun said dismissively. Ling Han shook his head with a sigh and said, "Seems like I was wrong to praise you for having an imagination. Your brain capacity is far too small, and it's probably comparable to that of cockroaches." "You!" Ding Xiaoqun glowered at Ling Han in anger. Ling Han smiled and said, "What? You want to fight?" Ding Xiaoqun forcefully suppressed his anger. He genuinely couldn't challenge Ling Han. Fighting against him? More like being pummeled by him. "Follow me. It's time to worship the ancestors." Ding Xiaoqun flicked his sleeves as he turned around to lead the way. However, he suddenly stopped after walking a few steps. This was because Ling Han wasn't following him. He couldn't help but snap in impatience. "Hurry up and follow me. If I obeyed your orders just like that, how humiliating would that be?" Not only did Ling Han not follow Ding Xiaoqun, but he even sat down instead. "Keep shouting. Anyhow, I'm in no hurry at all." "Perhaps you're in no hurry, but I'm in a great hurry." Ding Xiaoqun was red-faced with anger. It was because he greatly detested Ling Han that he had volunteered for this task. He wanted to seize this opportunity to abuse Ling Han. However, instead of angering Ling Han, he had angered himself instead. Moreover, if they were late, Ling Han would naturally suffer some punishment. However, would he get off any better? If he failed to complete such a simple task, what kind of horrible impression would he leave in the elders' minds? "Ling Han, don't sabotage yourself." Ding Xiaoqun was unwilling to beg Ling Han, so he could only choose to threaten him. However, There was a hint of ridicule on Ling Han's face as he glanced over. It was this kind of disdain that almost drove Ding Xiaochen insane. This was far too contemptuous. It was as if he weren't a human in Ling Han's eyes, but rather a pile of shit that wasn't deserving of a second glance. "Ling Han!" he shouted. Ling Han crossed his legs before picking at his ears and saying, "If you keep barking, I'll start to pummel you." Was there anything more threatening than this? "Ling Han, what do you want?" Ding Xiaochen asked solemnly. Ling Han grinned and replied, "Your words were too hurtful just then, so there's trauma in my mind now. I suddenly don't feel like moving." Holy shit! Who was angering whom just then? However, Ding Xiaochen didn't dare to shout again, so he could only say, "Fine, I'll apologize." "There's no sincerity," Ling Han said with a shake of his head. How could he show sincerity? Ding Xiaochen gritted his teeth and said, "Sorry for the nonsense I uttered just then. I know you're broad-minded, so please forgive me." Ling Han shook his head and said, "I'm extremely petty." Fuck! Ding Xiaochen rarely lost his composure. However, before Ling Han, he was always facing the risk of becoming a rabid dog who wanted to randomly bite people. He stared at Ling Han in resentment before suddenly bowing and saying, "I'm sorry." "What are you sorry for?" Ling Han said with a chuckle. "Although your words were hurtful, I felt like they were fairly accurate. People have to be upright and not submissive. Why did you submit so quickly? Where's your backbone and courage?" Ding Xiaochen was red-faced with anger, and flames were about to burst from his nostrils. He wanted to kill someone. However, Ling Han suddenly stood up and said, "What are you standing there in a daze for? Hurry up and walk. If we miss the blessed time, can you shoulder the responsibility?" These words easily defeated Ding Xiaochen's anger, and he could only obediently lead the way. Before Ling Han joined the Ding clan, he had to play along with him no matter what. At this moment, he truly wanted to slap himself in the face. Even if he wanted to exact revenge on Ling Han, it didn't have to be today. He had truly shot himself in the foot. Ling Han followed Ding Xiaochen to the ancestral shrine of the Ding clan. The Ding clan was huge, and this was obvious from their possession of a magnificent mountain that soared into the clouds. How was this a clan? Their land was even larger than an entire city of the ancient realm. Thus, even though they were both Saint Kings, it still took them almost an entire hour to reach the ancestral shrine. This was a golden shrine that was radiating with a majestic and dignified aura. It was both noble and solemn. However, Ling Han suddenly shook his head and said, "What a pity! What an absolute pity!" "Pity what?" Ding Xiaochen asked in his mind. However, he didn't voice his question to Ling Han. After all, conversing with Ling Han would never end well for him. He certainly didn't want to seek humiliation again. Moreover, once Ling Han became a member of the Ding clan, he would become meat on a chopping board. In actual fact, Ling Han was naturally expressing pity for this building that was about to transform into rubble soon. Many mighty figures had already arrived and were sitting in the stands. Several Third Severance Grand Elders had come today, and the only two from the Ding clan had also come. As for Ding Yaolong, he hadn't come to attend this ceremony. It wasn't important enough to catch his attention. Ding Xiaochen breathed a sigh of relief after bringing Ling Han to the ancestral shrine. He swore that he would definitely exact revenge tomorrow. He would show Ling Han his might. He shot a glare at Ling Han before turning around to leave. "Ling Han!" a low voice suddenly called. This was none other than Ding Hu. He started at Ling Han and said, "It's almost time. Come and worship the ancestors of the Ding clan, and we'll officially accept you into the Ding clan." Ling Han smiled and asked, "Are you certain that the Ding clan is willing to accept me?" Wasn't this nonsense? They had already opened their ancestral shrine, so how could they be playing around? "Of course," Ding Hu replied with a nod. Members of the two other large clans were also present, so he naturally had to consider the Ding clan's face. Otherwise, how could he be bothered speaking nonsense with a Genesis tier cultivator? "You won't regret it?" Ling Han asked with a smile. He was buying time. Meanwhile, he also started to grumble in his mind. Why isn't the large black dog here yet? He isn't trying to genuinely screw me over, is he? Ding Hu grimaced upon hearing this. Such annoying questions. He humphed and replied, "We naturally won't regret it. However, Ling Han cut Ding Hu off, saying, "Will the Ding clan take responsibility no matter what troubles I cause?" Ding Hu was already feeling a strong urge to kill someone. He felt immense regret for accepting this task. This was a young man who was always capable of driving people insane. However, he calmed himself down and said, "If you're a member of the Ding clan, we'll naturally be your shield regardless of what happens." "Really? For real?" Ling Han asked. Ding Hu's hands started to tremble. He wanted to kill someone, and no one could stop him. However, shouts of commotion suddenly traveled over from the distance. Moreover, it seemed like the commotion was fairly large. What was happening? One had to realize that this was the Ding clan. A smile spread across Ling Han's face. The large black dog had finally arrived. "Oh, you old bastard. Did you not have breakfast today? Or did you waste too much energy on debauchery with women? Your legs are like jelly, and you still haven't caught up to Grandpa Dog after half a day." The large black dog's voice slowly traveled over. "Do you want Grandpa Dog to take a handicap of one leg?" "Show." A black figure streaked through the air. This was a large black dog, yet he was wearing a pair of iron underwear that sparkled in the sunlight. One of his legs was raised, and sure enough, he was only running on 3 legs. Everyone faltered upon seeing this. What was going on? Why had a large black dog suddenly run over? This was the ancestral shrine of the Ding clan. Just how holy and dignified was this place? Even damaging a single tile would enrage their ancestors into leaping out from their graves. Impudence! Ding Hu roared as he immediately lashed out and grabbed at the large black dog. This large black dog was only at the Genesis tier, so heaven knew how he had managed to sneak into this place. However, Ding Hu suddenly understood how after grabbing at the large black dog. This was because the large black dog was extremely slippery. As he reached over, the large black dog actually shattered the void and started to dash around. Before long, he had already escaped from the range of his attack. Everyone was deeply astonished by this. How was this possible? Even a severing mundane tier Grand Elder had failed to capture the large black dog? Not only was Ding Hu astounded, but Mao Dai and the other elites from the Duan clan and the Long clan also exclaimed in surprise. At the same time, Mao Dai immediately looked toward Ling Han. Just then, his conversation with Ling Han had been extremely strange. Perhaps this large black dog had something to do with it? Boom! A terrifying aura surged over, causing everyone under the severing mundane tier to go pale. Some vomited blood, while others collapsed in their seats. The guests from the other clans were naturally all elites, so those who were wounded at this moment were all members of the Ding clan. Ding Hu was infuriated. First it was that large black dog. But who was it now? What place did they think this was? Was this a place where they could act wantonly? Humph! Who dares to act wantonly in my Ding clan? He roared as he hovered into the air. He moved forward to intercept the uninvited guest. Pa! However, a figure suddenly dashed over and furiously slapped Ding Hu across the face. Ding Hu was instantly sent flying, and he eventually crashed into a distant wall, blasting a gaping hole in it. He then disappeared in this hole. Ding Hu was a severing mundane tier Grand Elder. Although he was only at the first severance, those who advanced to this cultivation level were all supreme prodigies. Everyone looked toward the uninvited guest. Upon closer inspection, they discovered that this was an elderly man. There was a youth in his hands, and the aura that he exuded had already transformed into a tangible wave. It was as tumultuous as the vast sea. Fourth severance. Mao Dai and the other third severance Grand Elders from the Long clan and the Duan clan exclaimed in unison. This elderly man was clearly more powerful than them. There were only 3/4 severance Grand Elders in Dark Moon City, and they were none other than the current clan leaders of the 3 great clans. However, this old man clearly wasn't one of them, so where had he come from? Meanwhile, Ling Han was well aware of who this old man was. He was a member of the Han clan, and he had come here with Han Chi this time. Otherwise, it would be far too dangerous for a Genesis tier cultivator to venture around the celestial realm by themselves. Elder Han, why are you so angry? Ding Shan and Ding Song asked as they walked over to greet him. They naturally recognized him as he had come to visit them just a few days ago. At that time, they had spoken many good words to appease him. This old man was called Han Lu, and he couldn't be regarded as a top-notch elite of the Han clan. Here, however, he was definitely powerful enough to act as a domineering elder. Pooh! Someone suddenly spluttered with laughter. As it turned out, there was a large hole in Han Lu's clothing on his rear, revealing a patch of his pale white buttocks. By the looks of it, this hole was the result of a bite. Combining this with the large black dog's sudden arrival, it was easy to imagine what had happened. Han Lu had been bitten by a dog, and it was because of this that he had charged over. As a mighty fourth Severance Grand Elder, he had actually been bitten by a dog. How could he not be enraged? Han Lu completely ignored Ding Shan and Ding Song as he continued to look for the large black dog. However, as if he had evaporated from the world, Han Lu couldn't find a single trace of the large black dog. There was a loud roar as Ding Hu burst out from the hole in the wall. He was so furious that he wanted to kill someone. He had actually been attacked in the ancestral shrine of his own clan. Was there still any justice and reason in the world? However, upon charging out, he finally discovered that it was actually Han Lu who had slapped him across the face. His anger instantly vanished, and his expression became as awkward as could be. He had wanted to vent his fury, yet he discovered that his target wasn't someone he could provoke. What kind of feeling was this? Oi, old geezer, you actually dared to attack someone in my Ding clan? Are you tired of living? A voice suddenly said. This was none other than Ling Han. The members of the Ding clan almost suffered a heart attack upon hearing Ling Han's words. Are you fucking crazy? Do you know who this old man is? Before a severing mundane tier Grand Elder, is there any room for you to speak? Before Han Lu could explode in rage, Ding Song hurriedly said, Please forgive him, Elder. This is a junior from our clan, and he's never witnessed the world. Please don't take his words to heart. Today's ceremony was to accept Ling Han into the Ding clan, so Ding Song was subconsciously starting to view Ling Han as a member of the Ding clan already. Han Lu glanced over with a hint of anger on his face. However, he didn't erupt in rage. Although the Ding clan was insignificant in his eyes, it was still a subordinate of the Fu clan, after all. He could put pressure on them, but if he wantonly killed people, that would be equivalent to attacking the Fu clan's face. Thus, he needed to be careful. Of course, he could also choose to forcefully kill people. Who told Ling Han to offend a fourth Severance Grand Elder in the first place? Most importantly, Han Lu wanted to kill that large black dog. That dog had actually dared to bite his bum. How could he accept this? However, the large black dog was indeed extraordinary. He was only at the Genesis tier, yet he had actually managed to bite the bum of a fourth Severance Grand Elder. Moreover, he had retreated without a single wound. This was an absolute miracle. These two elders, how can we resolve this matter just like this? Ling Han said with an expression of righteousness. Moreover, Elder who has also been severely wounded, so how can we tolerate this? This is the ancestral shrine of our Ding clan. Yet, this old geezer actually dared to commit violence here without showing any respect toward our Ding clan. If we don't punish him, what face will the Ding clan have? Ding Song, Ding Shan, and Ding Hu all went pale upon hearing this. Ling Han was pushing the Ding clan into a pit of death. Sure enough, an expression of fury spread across Han Lu's face. This measly Genesis tier cultivator dared to humiliate him? He was seeking death. It was you! The youth who was being held in Han Lu's hands suddenly said. He stared at Ling Han with an expression of rage. He was none other than Han Chi. After being obliterated, he had surprisingly used some mysterious method to nurture a new body. Moreover, this body was definitely of the same bloodline as his. Otherwise, the affinity between them wouldn't be so high. Sure enough, Immortal Palace tier forces were truly powerful and impressive. Ling Han glanced at him and said, The Adults are speaking. So why are you interjecting? Old geezer. Hurry up and kneel to beg for forgiveness. However, Han Lu looked toward Han Chi and asked, Cheer, what's wrong? As the pampered son of the ancestor of the Han clan, the status of Han Chi was far too high. Otherwise, how could Han Lu personally accompany him around? He was a severing mundane tier Grand Elder, so his status would be extremely high no matter where he went in the celestial realm. Han Chi's entire body was trembling. This was out of anger. After so many years, he had finally found the perpetrator who had attacked him. His face was full of killing intent as he used his divine sense to communicate with Han Chi. Han Lu was also enraged upon hearing his words. Good one, Ding Clan, and you dared to say that the criminal in the ancient realm had nothing to do with you? Then who's this? How courageous of you. The last few times I asked, you even patted your chests and said that there was no such person. And I almost believed you people. Han Lu's expression suddenly became calm. He suppressed his anger and asked Ding Song and the others, This is a disciple of the Ding clan? Am I correct? Just then, he had heard Ding Song refer to this person as a junior of their clan. However, he still needed to confirm this before he flared up in rage. Elder Han, it's our fault for not teaching him properly. We're truly sorry for this, Ding Song hurriedly said. In his eyes, apologizing was definitely the way to go at this moment. He didn't consider anything else. Heh, so you're admitting it now. Ding Clan, how audacious of you. Han Lu suddenly roared. Boom! His voice transformed into a wave that surged into the surroundings. At this moment, there was nothing he needed to fear. So what if this was a subordinate force of the Fu clan? A member of their Han clan had already had their physical body obliterated. So how could they not exact revenge? In fact, the Fu clan definitely wouldn't interfere even if he destroyed the entire Ding clan. After all, how could a 3-star force be provoked by a 1-star force? Pung pung pung. Just how powerful was a 4th Severance Grand Elder? Under the powerful attack of his sound wave, 1/3 of the ancestral shrine was directly reduced to rubble. Meanwhile, the juniors of the Ding clan all vomited blood as they collapsed. There were countless deaths and injuries. Elder Han, Ding Shan and the others roared. To the Ding clan, this amount of damage was far too great. Humph! I'm going to destroy the Ding clan today. Han Lu was merciless, yet he didn't target Ling Han. He would execute this criminal after dragging him to 9 Underworld City. Meanwhile, Ling Han was also glad to watch this brilliant spectacle. After cooking up such a grand plan, and after acting for so long, it was finally time to reap the rewards. This felt incredible. Ding Shan and the others resisted with all their might, yet how could 3rd Severance Grand Elders rival the power of a 4th Severance Grand Elder? They would need at least several hundred other 3rd Severance Grand Elders to surmount the gulf between their cultivation levels. This was not to mention that Ding, who was only a 1st Severance Grand Elder. Ding Shan and Ding Song vomited blood each time that Han Lu attacked them. Meanwhile, Ding, who didn't dare to face his attacks at all. If he were hit by Han Lu's attacks, he would definitely die on the spot. The Ding clan had genuinely been screwed over. A severing mundane tier battle had erupted inside their clan territory. So just how much destruction was it going to cause? Most importantly, this was the ancestral shrine of their Ding clan. This was where the memorial tablets and remains of their ancestors were placed. After a few attacks, however, all of the memorial tablets naturally collapsed. Ling Han had absolutely no sympathy for them. In the past, the Ding clan had committed innumerable crimes to steal the Hu clan's celestial technique. In fact, they had even sought help from a celestial king tier force and directly erased the Hu clan. Just how sinful was this crime? Even though they were dead, Ling Han naturally wouldn't allow them to be peacefully worshipped. They deserved to be condemned for all eternity. The Ding clan was filled with an atmosphere of grief and indignance. This Han Lu was far too domineering. He even dared to destroy the memorial tablets of their ancestors. Moreover, he had actually wounded and killed so many people. Of course, they still hated Ling Han the most. After all, if it weren't for Ling Han's words, would Han Lu have erupted in such furious rage? They naturally believed that this was because Ling Han had provoked Han Lu just then. How could they know that there was actually a deeper reason? Ding Hu found an opportunity to break free, and he immediately charged at Ling Han. He was going to capture this brat and ask for punishment from Han Lu. Everything was Ling Han's fault. The Ding clan was innocent. Indeed, Ling Han hadn't even worshipped the ancestors of the Ding clan yet, so he couldn't be regarded as a true member of the Ding clan. They couldn't be dragged down because of Ling Han. Evil brat. I knew that nothing good could happen with you around. Ding Hu's eyes were red with grief and rage. Yet he knew that they definitely had to swallow this painful consequence. After all, did they dare to seek compensation from the Han clan? Thus, they could only kill Ling Han to ease their anger. If he knew that this was all part of Ling Han's plans, perhaps he would directly die from uncontrollable anger. Ling Han grinned and said, "Old bastard, I've been enduring you for a long time. Come and attack me." Pong! Ding Hu launched a strike, and Ling Han was instantly sent flying. However, Ling Han surprisingly didn't shatter into pieces of broken flesh. Instead, he appeared completely unscathed. His physique was far too powerful at this moment, so much so that even First Severance Grand Elders wouldn't be able to kill him with raw power alone. They could only use the power of regulations to slowly refine him. Continue your performance. Continue. Han Lu smiled coldly upon seeing these scenes. How easy was it for a First Severance Grand Elder to kill a Genesis tier cultivator? Yet, Ding Hu's attack hadn't even forced Ling Han to spit blood. Their acting skills were far too inferior. "Brother Han, you've taken things too far," a voice suddenly said with a sigh. Ding Yaolong finally appeared. If he still didn't appear, then the Ding clan would genuinely be done for.